Tonight, you are invited to slow down. There is nothing you need to remember, nothing you need to understand, and nothing you need to follow closely. This is not a lesson, and it is not a history book. It is simply a long, quiet journey into ancient Japanese myths and forgotten legends, told softly, as they once were, during calm nights when the world had finally grown still. Imagine the sky darkening slowly above an old Japanese landscape. The last sounds of the day fade away. Lanterns glow gently in the distance, their light warm and steady. Somewhere far away, a bell rings once, then silence returns. These stories were not meant to be rushed. They were meant to be listened to slowly, perhaps while resting, perhaps while drifting into sleep. Tonight, we will walk through the oldest stories of Japan, beginning before time itself, before mountains had names, before rivers had paths. You don't need to stay awake. You don't need to reach the end. Simply listen and allow the stories to unfold at their own pace. Party 1: The Creation of Japan. Before the world had shape, before it had direction, before there was up or down, land or sky, there was silence. A silence that did not follow noise and did not anticipate sound. It was simply there. Vast, endless, uninterrupted. This silence was not empty. It was full, but not crowded. Full of possibility, full of waiting. Time had not yet begun to move forward. It rested. It lingered. Nothing pushed it onward. There was no ground to stand on, and no horizon to look toward. There was no light and no darkness, only a gentle sameness spreading in every direction. If something existed within this silence, it did so without form, without weight, without urgency. The ancient stories of Japan begin here, not with creation, but with this quiet state of being. A state where nothing needed to happen, and therefore everything could. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, something began to shift. Not a movement, not an action, but a subtle difference. A lightness rose, separating itself from heaviness. What was light drifted upward. What was heavy settled downward. This was not a decision. It was a natural settling, like breath finding its rhythm. Between these two layers remained a space, a calm space, neither sky nor earth, a place of balance where stillness remained dominant. Within this space appeared two presences. They did not arrive, they did not enter, they simply became noticeable. Their names, given much later, were Izanagi and Izanami. But names are not important yet. What matters is their presence, calm, observant, patient. They did not speak. They did not rush to act. They looked downward, toward the formless depths below them. They felt the weight of potential. They sensed that creation was possible, but not necessary. Nothing demanded change. Eventually, gently, they were given a tool, a jeweled spear, not a weapon, not something meant for force, something meant to touch lightly. Together, they leaned forward, slowly, carefully. The spear lowered into the formless sea beneath them. The motion was unhurried. The surface responded softly, rippling without resistance. They stirred the depths, not to control them, but to observe them. And as the spear lifted again, droplets fell back into the sea. Each droplet fell without sound, without urgency. Where the droplets touched the surface, something new appeared, not suddenly, not dramatically. A small solid form began to take shape. It gathered itself gently, as if it had been waiting for permission to exist. This was the first land. It did not rise, it did not break through the surface. It simply became, floating calmly, resting quietly. Izanagi and Izanami descended onto this land. They felt its steadiness beneath them. Not firm, not fragile, balanced, present. They did not celebrate. They did not announce success. They stood quietly, sensing that this was only the beginning. Creation continued in this same way, slowly, patiently, without force. More land formed. Islands emerged one by one. Each took its time. Each settled into place naturally. Mountains rose gradually, their shapes soft and enduring. Rivers found paths without being directed. Forests spread gently, tree by tree, leaf by leaf. Nothing competed, nothing rushed. Within these forming landscapes, presences appeared, spirits of place, later called kami. They did not rule, they did not command. They inhabited. A mountain held a presence, a river carried awareness, a tree watched quietly. These spirits did not demand attention. They did not speak loudly. They existed alongside the land, inseparable from it. Time moved differently now, slowly. Cycles began. Stillness followed movement. Rest followed creation. And the world continued to form, not through struggle, but through balance. As the land continued to rest upon the quiet waters, time itself seemed to slow even further. There was no clear beginning to each moment, and no clear end. Everything flowed gently into what followed. Izanagi and Izanami moved through this forming world without leaving traces, observing more than acting, listening more than shaping. The land did not resist them, and they did not impose their will upon it. Creation happened in cooperation, not command. They walked across the first island slowly, feeling how the ground responded beneath their steps. Some places felt lighter, others heavier, as if the land itself was still deciding what it wished to become. Where their presence lingered, the earth seemed to breathe, expanding and settling again, calm and untroubled. From their union, more forms emerged, not all at once and never in a hurry. New islands appeared, spaced apart by wide stretches of water, each one unique, each one quiet in its own way. Some were long and gentle, others smaller and more compact. Together, they would one day be known as Japan, but at this moment, they were simply land, resting on water, under an open sky. As the land grew, so did the subtle presences within it. The kami did not arrive with sound or spectacle. They did not announce themselves. They simply became noticeable, like a feeling you realize has been there all along. A mountain held a sense of still attention. A river carried a slow awareness as it moved. Even the wind, passing gently across the land, seemed to observe without judgment. These spirits did not speak in words. They communicated through presence, through the way a place felt when one stood there quietly, through the sense that nothing was truly empty, even when it appeared so. Creation continued, but it was not without change. Izanami, who had given so much of herself to bringing new forms into existence, began to grow weary. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but gradually, as if her energy was slowly being drawn into the world she was shaping. The act of creation left its mark. When Izanami eventually withdrew from the world of the living, it was not marked by chaos or collapse. The land did not break apart. The sky did not darken. Instead, there was a subtle shift, a quiet absence, like the moment after a sound fades and silence returns, slightly different than before. Izanagi felt this absence deeply, not as anger, not as despair, but as stillness. A stillness that carried weight. He turned away from creation for a time, allowing the world to continue without his guidance. Rivers still flowed, mountains remained unmoving. The kami continued their quiet watch. Eventually, Izanagi sought renewal, not to undo what had happened, but to restore balance within himself. He turned toward water, toward cleansing, toward slow and deliberate movement. As he washed, the act itself, became another form of creation. From this purification, new presences emerged. From his left eye came Amaterasu, gentle and radiant, carrying the quiet warmth of the sun. From his right eye came Tsukiyomi, calm and distant, embodying the soft light of the moon. From his breath emerged Susanoo, restless and wandering, carrying the shifting energy of storms. These beings did not compete. They did not struggle for dominance. They took their places naturally, each filling a role that balanced the others. Day followed night. Light followed shadow. Calm followed movement. With their presence, the world gained rhythm, not a rigid structure, but a flowing pattern. Mornings softened into afternoons. Afternoons faded into evenings. Nights rested deeply, preparing for the return of light. The land responded to this rhythm. Plants grew in cycles. Water rose and fell. Even the kami seemed to move in harmony with this gentle pattern, never rushing, never resisting. Japan, as the ancient stories tell it, was shaped not through force, but through attention, through patience, through the willingness to allow things to become what they were meant to be in their own time. And beneath all of this, the original silence remained. It did not disappear. It did not retreat. It simply settled beneath the layers of creation, still present, still waiting. Even now, it is said that if one stands quietly enough, listens long enough, that ancient silence can still be felt, resting gently beneath the world. As the world continued to settle into its quiet rhythm, there was no sense of completion. Creation did not feel finished, and it did not need to be. It existed as an ongoing process, unfolding gently, without a final goal. The land breathed slowly. The waters rested between movements. The sky remained open and patient. Amaterasu's light did not rush across the land. It arrived softly, spreading warmth without intensity. It revealed shapes rather than defining them sharply. Mountains appeared more clearly under her presence, their slopes catching light and releasing it again. Rivers reflected her glow, not brightly, but calmly, like a memory rather than a mirror. When night followed day, Tsukiyomi's presence was just as gentle. The moon did not compete with the sun. It softened what had been revealed, allowing shadows to return without fear. Under moonlight, the land felt quieter, more inward. Sounds became distant. Movement slowed even further. Susanoo wandered between these cycles. His energy was not always calm, but it was necessary. He carried change, movement, and unpredictability. Yet even his storms did not destroy the balance. Rain nourished the land. Wind reshaped what had grown too rigid. After each disturbance, stillness returned, deeper than before. The kami continued to inhabit every part of the world. Some were tied to specific places, never leaving them. Others moved freely, drifting through valleys, across fields, along coastlines. They did not interfere with one another. Each presence respected the space of the others, as if guided by an unspoken understanding. In the forests, trees grew without urgency. Their roots spread slowly, feeling their way through the soil. Leaves opened and closed with the passing of light. The forest did not try to become dense or sparse. It simply became what the land allowed. In the mountains, stone held memory. Each layer of rock carried the weight of time without strain. The mountains did not seek attention. They observed everything from a distance, unmoved by small changes, yet deeply aware of the slow passage of ages. Along the shores, the sea repeated its movements endlessly. Waves rose and fell, again and again, never identical, never rushed. The sound was neither loud nor quiet. It was steady, comforting, a reminder that movement could exist without urgency. As these elements settled, the world grew accustomed to itself. There was no sense of novelty anymore. Creation had become normal. The extraordinary had softened into the ordinary, and in that softness, peace emerged. The ancient stories suggest that this was the moment when the world became suitable for life. Not because it was complete, but because it was balanced. Not perfect, but stable. The land no longer shifted constantly. The waters knew their boundaries. The sky followed its cycles. And still, beneath everything, the original silence remained. It wove itself between sounds. It filled the spaces between movements. It was present in pauses, in still moments, in the calm between breaths. This silence was not separate from the world. It was part of it. It reminded all things that rest was as important as motion, that stillness was not absence, but presence without demand. The land of Japan rested within this understanding, a land shaped by patience, a land born from cooperation rather than force, a land where even the gods moved slowly, allowing the world to unfold rather than directing it sharply. And so the first age of the world continued, not marked by events, but by quiet continuity. Days passed without being counted. Nights deepened without being measured. Time flowed without pressure. This was the foundation upon which everything else would eventually rest. Before humans, before villages, before stories were written or spoken aloud, a world already complete in its incompleteness. A world still breathing, still listening, still waiting. As time continued its gentle passage, the world no longer felt new, yet it never felt old. It existed in a state of quiet continuity, where each moment flowed naturally into the next without resistance. Nothing hurried forward, and nothing lingered behind. The land simply remained, steady and present. The sky arched calmly above the islands, changing slowly, almost imperceptibly. Light faded and returned in a rhythm that required no attention. Day did not announce itself. Night did not insist. They followed one another like breaths, rising and falling without effort. Across the land, the kami continued their silent watch. They did not grow restless. They did not seek worship or recognition. They were content to exist within their places, woven into stone, water, wind, and soil. A river knew itself as movement. A mountain knew itself as stillness. A forest knew itself as quiet life unfolding patiently. Nothing needed to be added. Nothing needed to be taken away. In this early age, there were no footsteps other than those of the gods and the spirits. No voices disturbed the air. No tools shaped the land. The world belonged entirely to itself. It learned its own rhythms. It tested its own balance. And when imbalance appeared, it corrected itself slowly, without force. Rain fell when it was needed, not in excess, not in scarcity. The earth absorbed it calmly. Plants grew at a pace that matched the land's ability to sustain them. Even storms, when they came, passed without leaving lasting harm. Afterward, stillness returned, deeper and more settled than before. The ancient stories speak of this time as a long breath held gently, not in tension, but in peace. A breath that contained all future possibilities, resting quietly beneath the surface. The world was not waiting for something else to begin. It was already whole. Gradually, very gradually, the silence that had once filled everything began to step back, not disappearing, but making room. It remained present in pauses, in spaces, in moments between moments. It became the background upon which all sounds would rest. This was the silence that humans would one day feel when standing alone beneath the night sky. The silence that would be sensed in deep forests, on distant shores, or beside still water. A silence that does not feel empty, but full. The land of Japan settled into this state gently. Its mountains rooted themselves deeply. Its rivers traced paths they would follow for ages. Its shores accepted the steady rhythm of the sea. Everything found its place, not because it was assigned, but because it belonged there. And so the first chapter of the world came to rest, not with an ending, but with a pause. A long, calm pause that allowed what came next to emerge naturally, without disruption. Before people would walk these lands, before names would be spoken aloud, before stories would be told by firelight, the world existed in quiet balance. It listened, it breathed, it waited. And even now, it is said that this ancient stillness has never fully left. It remains beneath the surface of things, accessible to anyone willing to slow down, to listen, to rest within the quiet for just a little while longer. It filled the spaces between Mo. Party 2, the Kami, Silent Spirits of Nature. After the world had settled into its quiet balance, something gentle began to reveal itself more clearly. It had been present from the beginning, woven into the land and the water, resting within stone and wind. Now, it became easier to feel. These were the Kami, not gods in the distant sense, and not rulers of the world, but quiet presences that belonged to the places they inhabited. The Kami did not arrive from elsewhere. They did not descend from the sky or rise from the depths. They were born with the land itself, emerging naturally as the world took shape. Wherever something existed with patience and continuity, a presence formed there. Not loud, not demanding, simply aware. A mountain did not just stand, it listened. Within its stillness, a Kami rested, unmoving, observing the slow passage of clouds and seasons. The mountain did not need to act, its existence was enough. Time flowed around it, never through it. A river did not simply flow, it remembered. As water moved gently over stone, a river Kami followed its path, aware of every curve, every pause, every widening and narrowing. The river never hurried, it knew where it was going, even without intention. In the forests, Kami gathered quietly among the trees, not in crowds, not in clusters, but spaced naturally like leaves on branches. Each tree held its own presence, subtle and calm. Roots spread slowly through the earth, and the Kami within them rested, feeling the steady pulse of the land. These spirits did not speak with voices. They communicated through sensation, through the way a place felt when one stood there long enough, through the calm that settled when movement slowed, through the sense that nothing was truly alone. Even the wind carried awareness. As it passed gently across fields and hills, a wind Kami moved with it, touching leaves lightly, brushing against stone, never staying, never leaving completely. The wind did not need to be seen to be felt. The Kami did not ask for attention. They did not require offerings or words. They existed whether they were noticed or not. Their presence was steady, unchanging, patient beyond measure. Time passed differently for them. What felt like centuries to the land was only a quiet moment to a mountain Kami. What felt like a long day to a river was simply a continuation of movement. The Kami did not count time. They rested within it. As the world continued to breathe, the relationship between the land and its spirits deepened. The land shaped the Kami, and the Kami reflected the land. Neither controlled the other. They existed together, inseparable. There were Kami of places rarely touched, high cliffs, distant shores, deep valleys where light moved slowly. These spirits were especially quiet, content to observe without interruption. Their awareness spread gently, without edges. There were also Kami of small things, stones warmed by the sun, paths worn smooth by time, pools of still water where reflections lingered longer than expected. Even these held presence. Even these were not empty. The ancient stories tell us that to notice a kami, one did not look directly. One slowed down, one waited, one allowed the mind to quiet, just as the land had quieted long ago. And in that stillness, awareness naturally emerged. Nothing dramatic happened when a kami was felt. There were no signs, no declarations, just a sense of being accompanied, a sense that the world was paying attention in its own calm way. And so the land of Japan became not just a place of mountains and rivers, but a place of quiet companionship. Everywhere, something listened. Everywhere, something rested. The world continued like this for a long time, long enough that stillness became familiar, long enough that presence required no explanation. And beneath it all, the original silence remained, supporting the kami just as it supported the land itself. As awareness of the kami deepened, the land itself seemed to invite longer moments of stillness. Places did not call out to be noticed, yet they felt complete when someone paused near them. A hillside at dusk, a quiet bend in a river, the base of an old tree where shadows rested longer than elsewhere. These places did not change, but the way they were felt became softer, more spacious. Some kami remained tied to vast elements. The mountain kami continued their patient watch, feeling seasons pass like distant echoes. Snow settled, melted, returned again. Clouds brushed against stone and drifted away. The mountain did not respond. It did not need to. Its presence was already complete. Other kami moved gently within smaller spaces. A stream flowing through a narrow valley carried a presence that shifted slowly with the water. It paused where the current slowed. It lingered where stones created gentle patterns. It continued onward without concern for destination. In fields and open land, earth kami rested close to the surface. They felt the weight of grass bending under dew. They sensed warmth spreading slowly after sunrise. These presences did not hurry growth. They allowed it. They supported without directing. At the edges of forests where light and shadow met, kami lingered comfortably. These were places of transition, neither fully open nor fully hidden. The spirits there were especially calm, accustomed to change without disruption. Leaves fell, new ones appeared. The cycle continued without comment. Sacred spaces began to emerge naturally, not because they were declared sacred, but because stillness gathered there more easily. A cluster of stones arranged by time rather than hands. A clearing where sound softened. A place where the air felt slightly heavier, as if it carried memory. In these spaces, the kami were not stronger. They were simply easier to feel. Their presence settled into awareness gently, like a thought that arrives without effort. There was no need to name it, no need to respond. The ancient stories suggest that people would later build shrines, not to contain the kami, but to acknowledge where they already rested. The structures were simple, quiet, meant to blend rather than stand apart. Wood weathered naturally. Paths remained narrow. Nothing interrupted the balance. The kami did not require permanence. If a shrine faded, the presence remained. If a path disappeared, awareness did not vanish. The spirits were not attached to form. They rested within essence. Time continued its slow movement. Days softened into nights. Nights opened into mornings. The land learned to recognize itself through repetition. And within that repetition, calm deepened. Sometimes, when wind passed through tall grass or branches, it carried a sense of gentle communication. Not a message, not instruction, simply acknowledgement, the world recognizing itself. Water reflected this awareness easily. Still ponds held images without clinging to them. When a leaf touched the surface, ripples formed, expanded, then faded. The kami within the water observed this without judgment, accepting change as part of stillness. Even places shaped by movement held calm. A waterfall, endlessly active, remained deeply peaceful. The sound did not disrupt silence. It became part of it. The kami there rested within motion itself, untroubled by constant change. As the land breathed, the relationship between the world and its spirits remained effortless. Nothing was demanded. Nothing was withheld. Presence existed freely, evenly distributed across all things. This was not a world filled with signs or omens. It was a world filled with quiet assurance, the sense that everything belonged simply by existing. The kami did not protect or punish. They accompanied, they witnessed, they remained. And so, the land of Japan continued to rest within this gentle awareness, a land alive not through noise or activity, but through attention, through patience, through the enduring presence of spirits that asked for nothing and offered calm in return. As awareness continued to soften, the land seemed to invite even deeper attention. Not attention that searched or focused, but attention that rested, the kind that notices without effort. In this state, the presence of the kami felt less like something external and more like something quietly shared. Paths began to matter, not as destinations, but as experiences. A narrow trail winding through trees did not simply connect two places. It offered time. Each step slowed naturally. The kami along these paths did not guide or block the way. They accompanied a touch. They observed movement without needing to respond. Stone bridges crossing small streams carried stillness within motion. Water passed beneath, endlessly changing, while the bridge remained unmoved. The kami there rested in balance, aware of both permanence and flow at the same time. Neither state was preferred, both belonged. In places where humans would later pass more frequently, the kami did not retreat. They adapted. Their presence softened further, becoming quieter, more subtle. Not weaker, simply less noticeable. They learned to exist beneath sound, beneath movement, beneath attention. Shrines, when they appeared, did not interrupt this balance. They were built slowly, carefully, often from materials already present. Wood that aged naturally, stone that blended into the land. These structures were not homes for the kami, but acknowledgements, a pause in space, a place where stillness could gather easily. At these sites, the air often felt heavier, not oppressive, but dense with calm. Sound behaved differently. Footsteps softened, voices lowered naturally. Even without intention, the body responded, slowing down in recognition. The kami did not gather in these places more than elsewhere. They were simply easier to feel, as if awareness itself had settled there over time. Nothing dramatic occurred. No signs appeared. Just a quiet sense of presence that asked nothing in return. Further away, in places untouched for long periods, the kami rested even more deeply. Old forests where fallen trees were left undisturbed, shores where tides shaped the land without interruption, high places where wind passed freely. In these areas, presence felt ancient, layered, patient beyond measure. Time seemed to stretch in such places. Moments lengthened, thoughts slowed. The boundary between observation and rest blurred. The kami there did not react to being noticed. They remained as they were, steady and unchanging. As night approached these landscapes, awareness shifted again. Darkness did not hide the kami. It revealed them differently. Without light, attention turned inward. Sounds carried farther, then softened. The presence of spirits felt closer, not because they moved, but because distractions faded. Moonlight traced familiar shapes in unfamiliar ways. Shadows deepened, edges blurred. The land appeared less defined, more fluid. The kami rested comfortably in this uncertainty. They did not require clarity. They thrived within suggestion and ambiguity. In these hours, silence grew fuller. Not absence, but depth. The kind of silence that supports rather than empties. The kami existed easily within it, just as they had existed within the original stillness before creation took shape. As the night deepened further, even awareness became optional. The land did not require observation to continue being itself. The spirits did not require recognition to remain present. Everything existed without effort. This was the state the ancient stories returned to again and again. A world not driven by action, but by continuity. A world where presence was enough, where nothing needed to be added or removed. And so, the kami continued their quiet watch. In mountains and rivers, in forests and fields, in places remembered and places forgotten, they remained woven into the land itself, inseparable from its rhythm. The land of Japan rested within this gentle companionship, alive, aware, and calm. A world where silence was not empty, but shared, where stillness was not absence, but connection. And as the night stretched on, everything remained exactly where it needed to be. Party 3. Walking through a forest at night. The forest begins before it is entered. Long before the first tree appears, the air already feels different. Sounds soften, movements slow. Even the space between thoughts seems to widen. Walking toward the forest at night is not about arrival. It is about gradually leaving everything else behind. As the path narrows, the ground changes beneath each step. Soil replaces stone. Leaves rest where they have fallen, undisturbed, layered softly over time. Each footstep is absorbed, leaving no echo, no trace. The forest does not respond, it receives. Trees rise quietly on either side. Their trunks are steady, vertical, patient. They do not lean forward. They do not retreat. They simply remain, holding their place in the darkness. Branches stretch overhead, weaving a canopy that filters the night gently, allowing only fragments of sky to remain visible. The air here feels older, cooler, not cold, but settled. Breathing becomes slower without effort. The forest does not ask for silence, yet silence arrives naturally. Sounds that exist feel distant, softened, as if wrapped in layers of leaves and time. Somewhere deeper within, a subtle awareness moves. Not a presence that follows, not something that approaches, just a sense that the forest is awake in its own way. The kami here are not separate from the trees. They rest within bark and root, within shadow and space between branches. A tree does not merely stand, it listens. Its roots extend far beneath the surface, touching others, overlapping, communicating without sound. The kami within them rest in this quiet network, feeling vibrations that never reach the surface. As the path continues, light becomes less certain. Moonlight filters through leaves unevenly, creating soft patterns on the ground that shift slowly as branches move. Shadows do not stay still. They stretch, shorten, blur, then settle again. The forest floor holds many textures. Moss that cushions stone, fallen branches softened by time, earth that yields slightly underweight, then returns to stillness. Each surface slows movement further, encouraging pauses that do not feel intentional. Here, time feels different. Minutes lose their edges. There is no clear sense of how long one has been walking. The forest does not measure progress. It allows wandering without direction. Occasionally, a sound emerges, not sharp, not startling. The quiet movement of leaves brushing against one another, a distant shift in the undergrowth, the soft settling of something returning to rest. these sounds do not interrupt silence. They belong to it. The kami of the forest do not reveal themselves directly. They do not appear. They are felt through atmosphere rather than form, through the way the forest seems to hold everything gently, without tension. As awareness deepens, the boundary between the walker and the forest softens. Breathing aligns with the rhythm of the surroundings. Movement slows to match the pace of growing things. The forest does not change to accommodate this presence. It simply continues, unchanged, unbothered. Each tree carries memory, seasons layered within rings unseen, rain absorbed and released, wind endured without complaint. The kami within these trees rests deeply, content to observe without interference. Further in, the forest grows denser. Paths become suggestions rather than directions. One could stop anywhere, stand anywhere. Nothing urges continuation. Nothing urges return. The night settles more fully now. Darkness thickens, but does not close in. It remains open, spacious, breathable. The forest accepts night as it accepts everything else, without resistance. And so the walk continues, not toward a destination, but deeper into stillness, deeper into the quiet awareness that the forest has always held. A place where nothing needs to happen and nothing is missing. As the walk continues, the forest seems to grow quieter, not because sound disappears, but because attention changes. The ears stop searching, they stop expecting. They simply receive whatever arrives. In this softened state, even the smallest sounds feel complete, requiring no response. Breathing settles into a slower rhythm. Each inhale feels deeper, fuller. Each exhale lingers a little longer before the next breath begins. The forest does not guide this rhythm. It mirrors it, or perhaps it is the other way around. It becomes difficult to tell where one ends and the other begins. The ground beneath feels more familiar now. Each step lands with certainty, even without seeing clearly. The body adjusts naturally, finding balance without conscious effort. Roots and stones are avoided instinctively. Movement becomes smooth, almost automatic. Some trees stand close together, their trunks nearly touching. Others leave wide spaces between them, creating small clearings where the night feels especially open. In these spaces, the air seems to rest. Nothing passes through quickly. Even thoughts slow down here. The kami of the forest remain quiet, resting within this shared stillness. They do not observe in the way eyes observe. They sense through connection, through the slow exchange between soil, root, moisture, and time. Their awareness is steady, without focus, without urgency. Leaves overhead shift gently as the night air moves through them. The sound is soft, repetitive, comforting. It does not demand attention. It reassures without explanation. The forest breathes this way constantly, even when no one is there to listen. Occasionally, a faint sound travels through the distance. Not close enough to define, not far enough to ignore. It fades before it can be identified, leaving behind only the impression of movement returning to rest. Nothing feels interrupted. Darkness deepens further, yet vision adjusts. Shapes become simpler, edges soften. The forest no longer needs to be seen clearly to be understood. Presence replaces detail. Awareness replaces observation. The path, if it can still be called that, curves gently without reason. It does not aim for a destination. It follows the land's preference. Walking becomes less about forward motion and more about remaining within the moment that is already here. Time stretches quietly. There is no sense of how long the walk has lasted. The forest does not measure duration. It exists outside of clocks, outside of counting. Each moment feels complete on its own. The air carries a faint, earthy scent. damp soil, old leaves, wood that has rested for a long time. These scents do not shift suddenly. They remain constant, grounding awareness gently, without stimulation. Somewhere nearby, water moves slowly, not a stream with direction, but moisture settling, shifting, finding its place. The sound is barely noticeable, yet deeply calming. It blends into the background, becoming part of the forest's quiet presence. The kami here feel especially settled. They do not move, they do not respond, they simply remain, anchored within the forest's rhythm. They are not guarding anything, they are not waiting, they are at ease. Standing still becomes as natural as walking. There is no need to continue forward. There is no need to turn back. The forest holds both choices equally, without preference. In this state, even awareness begins to soften. Thoughts slow, then drift apart, leaving wider spaces between them. The forest does not fill these spaces. It allows them to remain open. The night deepens, not toward darkness, but toward rest. Everything that needs to settle does so naturally. Everything that needs to remain awake does so quietly. And within this calm, the walk continues, or perhaps it pauses. It becomes difficult to tell. The forest does not insist on clarity. It offers stillness instead. At some point, movement becomes optional. The forest no longer feels like a place to pass through, but a place to remain within. Standing still feels as natural as walking, and walking feels almost unnecessary. The body rests into the space it occupies, supported quietly by the ground beneath. The air feels thicker now, not heavy, but full. It carries the accumulated calm of countless nights like this one. Nights where nothing needed to happen. Nights where the forest simply existed, unchanged, unobserved, complete in itself. The trees seem closer, not because they have moved, but because awareness has softened. Their presence feels steady and reassuring. Each trunk rises without effort, holding its place without tension. The kami within them rests deeply, untroubled by the passing of time. Somewhere above, branches shift slowly, creating gentle patterns against the sky. The movement is unhurried. Leaves brush against one another with a sound so soft it barely registers. The repetition is soothing, predictable, safe. The forest floor feels cool and stable. Soil holds warmth gathered during the day, releasing it slowly now that night has settled fully. Moss cushions stone. Fallen leaves form soft layers that give slightly under weight, then return to stillness. Breathing continues to slow. Inhale, pause. Exhale, pause. Each breath feels complete on its own, without needing the next to follow immediately. The forest does not rush this rhythm. It holds space for it. The kami here feel less distinct now, not because they have faded, but because separation itself has softened. Presence blends into presence. The forest, the spirits, and awareness begin to share the same quiet space. Sounds become rarer, but not absent. A distant settling, a quiet shift, a barely perceptible movement returning to rest. These sounds do not interrupt the calm, they confirm it. The darkness feels stable, not enclosing. It does not press inward, it opens outward. Vision becomes less important. Sensation takes its place, temperature, texture, breath, stillness. Time continues to stretch, losing its shape. Minutes feel like moments. Moments feel like gentle pauses. There is no sense of progression, only continuation. The forest does not watch, it does not wait, it remains. And within that remaining, everything else is allowed to soften. Even thought begins to loosen its grip. Ideas appear less frequently. When they do arise, they drift through slowly, without attachment, dissolving back into quiet without effort. The path is no longer relevant. Direction no longer matters. The forest holds all positions equally. Forward, backward, standing still, all belong. The kami remain present, but unobtrusive. They do not guide awareness. They do not withdraw from it. They exist alongside it, steady and calm. This is the heart of the forest at night. Not a location, but a state. A shared stillness that does not require explanation. A calm that exists whether it is noticed or not. The body responds naturally. Muscles release. Shoulders soften. The space behind the eyes grows quiet. The weight of the day, wherever it came from, no longer asks to be carried. Nothing is expected. Nothing is required. The forest offers rest without instruction. And so, whether standing or slowly moving, awareness continues to settle deeper into this calm, deeper into the quiet that has always been here, waiting without impatience. Eventually, even the sense of being within the forest begins to soften. The boundaries between presence and place grow thinner, less defined. The forest no longer feels like something surrounding awareness. It feels like something awareness rests within, gently supported on all sides. Movement has nearly disappeared now, not because it has stopped, but because it no longer feels necessary. The body remains still, without effort. Breathing continues on its own, slow and even, rising and falling like the quiet rhythms of the land. The trees remain where they are, steady and patient. Their presence is constant, unchanging. They do not lean closer. They do not pull away. They simply exist, offering a sense of permanence that does not demand attention. Darkness holds everything softly. It does not conceal. It simplifies. Details fade, leaving only what is essential: space, breath, stillness. The forest does not resist this simplification. It welcomes it. The kami remain present, but now they are almost indistinguishable from the calm itself. Not separate beings, not observers, but part of the quiet field in which everything rests. Their awareness blends seamlessly with the forest, with the land, with the night. Sound has become rare. When it appears, it arrives gently, then fades without leaving an echo. The silence that follows feels full, stable, reassuring. Nothing interrupts it. Nothing disturbs it. Time no longer moves forward in any noticeable way. It rests. Moments do not stack or accumulate. Each one stands alone, complete and sufficient. There's no sense of waiting for the next. The forest floor feels steady beneath. The earth holds everything without strain. It supports weight effortlessly, as it has done for countless nights, countless seasons, without ever needing recognition. Thoughts, if they appear at all, arrive softly and leave just as gently. There is no need to follow them, no need to resolve them. They dissolve naturally into the quiet that surrounds them. The sense of self becomes lighter, less defined, not disappearing, but resting, like a shape softened by darkness, still present, but no longer demanding clarity. Everything that remains feels balanced: breath, space, awareness. The forest does not add to this balance. It does not take away. It simply holds it. This is the deep rest the ancient stories point toward. Not sleep forced or hurried, but sleep allowed. Sleep that arrives naturally when nothing resists it. The forest remains awake in its own way, even as awareness drifts. The kami continue their quiet presence. The land continues to breathe. Nothing ends here. Nothing begins. Everything simply continues, gently, calmly, without interruption. And as awareness settles further, the forest remains, unchanged, patient, allowing rest to deepen as much as it needs to. PART4. Solitary yokai. When the forest grows quiet enough, when even stillness feels settled, other presences begin to make themselves known. Not suddenly, not clearly. They do not step forward or reveal themselves fully. They simply exist nearby, at the edges of awareness. These are the yokai, not monsters, not threats, but solitary beings shaped by time, memory, and quiet places. The ancient stories describe yokai as beings that do not belong entirely to one world or another. They are not human, and they are not entirely spirit. They exist between moments, between places, between states of being. This in-between quality gives them a calm distance, a way of observing without involvement. At night, especially in places where people rarely linger, yokai are said to feel more at ease, not because they seek darkness, but because darkness softens attention. It allows them to remain unnoticed, unchallenged, free from expectation. Some yokai are tied to forests, appearing only where trees have stood undisturbed for long periods. They do not hide, they simply blend. Their presence is felt more than seen, like a shift in atmosphere, a subtle change in the weight of the air. A kitsune, the fox spirit, might rest quietly near the edge of a clearing, not watching, not hunting, simply present. Its awareness moves slowly, calmly, attentive without curiosity. The kitsune does not interfere. It observes the land the way the land observes itself. Its form is not fixed. Sometimes it appears as an animal, sometimes as a suggestion of movement, sometimes not at all. What remains constant is its stillness, its patience, the sense that it has been there for a very long time and will remain long after attention passes. Other yokai wander gently. They follow paths without destinations. They pause where silence gathers. They rest where time feels less important. These yokai do not seek interaction. They avoid disturbance, choosing solitude over presence. There are yokai who inhabit old trees, their awareness intertwined with roots and bark. They feel seasons passing without marking them. Leaves fall, snow settles, light returns. Nothing requires response. The yokai remain unchanged. In the stories, yokai are rarely described in moments of action. Instead, they are described in moments of pause, standing at a distance, watching from shadows, listening without being seen. Their existence is defined by restraint. At night, when attention softens, one might sense a yokai nearby without knowing why. A feeling of being gently accompanied, not watched, not followed, simply not alone. This presence does not demand fear. It does not invite curiosity. It exists quietly, content to remain unnoticed. If attention drifts away, the yokai does not follow. It returns to stillness, to the space between moments. The land accepts these beings without resistance. Yokai belong as naturally as stones or wind. They are not disruptions. They are part of the world's quieter layers. As awareness settles deeper, the idea of yokai becomes less defined. They are no longer figures or stories. They are moods, atmospheres, gentle reminders that the world holds more than what is immediately visible. The night holds them comfortably. Darkness does not conceal them. It supports them. It allows them to exist without explanation. And so, the yokai remain nearby, solitary and calm, resting within the spaces where attention fades and sleep begins to take hold. As the night deepens, the presence of the yokai becomes even more subtle. They do not approach. They do not withdraw. They simply remain where they are, comfortable within the quiet. Their existence feels woven into the landscape itself, as natural as the stillness of the trees or the softness of the air. Some yokai are said to follow old paths. ones that people once used often but now rarely walk. These paths still remember footsteps, even when no one travels them. The yokai linger there, not waiting, not searching, simply resting within the memory of movement. A gentle wind moves through the forest, brushing leaves together in slow, unhurried rhythms. The yokai respond not by moving, but by settling even deeper into place. They feel the air change. They acknowledge it quietly, without reaction. There are yokai who dwell near stones that have remained untouched for generations. These stones hold warmth during the day and release it slowly at night. The yokai rest nearby, sharing this gentle exchange of heat and coolness, attuned to cycles that require no attention. Their awareness is calm and expansive. It does not focus on details. It does not follow thoughts. It rests broadly, like moonlight spread across the forest floor, touching everything without concentrating on any one thing. Some yokai take interest in human presence only in the softest way. Not curiosity, not judgment, more like recognition, a sense that something familiar has entered their space, even if it will not stay long. They do not reveal themselves fully. At most, they allow a faint impression to arise, a slight shift in atmosphere, a gentle feeling of companionship, something that fades as soon as it is noticed. Old houses, long abandoned, are also places where yokai feel at ease. These structures still hold echoes of warmth, of voices, of quiet routines repeated over many years. Yokai do not disturb these memories, they rest among them. Inside such spaces, the air feels different, still, but not empty. The yokai remain present, respecting what once was without trying to recreate it. They share the silence with the dust and the wood and the shadows. Time behaves differently around these beings. It does not hurry. It does not pause dramatically. It simply flows without urgency. The yokai exist comfortably within this slow passage, untouched by its movement. The forest continues its quiet breathing. The night continues to settle. The yokai continue to remain. Awareness, too, begins to slow further. Thoughts drift more freely now, appearing and dissolving without attachment. There is no need to follow them. The yokai do not. Their presence invites nothing. It demands nothing. It simply exists, offering a sense of calm companionship that does not require interaction. In this gentle coexistence, everything begins to soften further. The boundary between story and sensation fades. What remains is atmosphere, quiet, rest. And as the night continues to deepen, the yokai remain exactly where they are, content within the stillness, allowing sleep to arrive naturally, without effort. As the forest rests more deeply, the presence of the yokai becomes quieter still, not because they are leaving, but because attention itself is softening. The need to notice fades, and in its place comes a gentle acceptance of whatever remains. Some yokai are said to wander through sleeping villages long after lamps have gone dark. These villages breathe slowly at night. Roofs cool, wooden walls settle. The yokai move without sound, not passing through doors or windows, but through spaces where awareness no longer lingers. They do not disturb, they do not observe. They simply exist within the calm left behind by human routines, footsteps that once crossed floors, voices that once filled rooms. The yokai rest within these memories without touching them. A yokai might pause near a quiet well, its water perfectly still beneath the night sky. The surface reflects darkness without distortion. The yokai do not look into the water. They feel its depth, its patience, its ability to hold reflection without attachment. In gardens long untended, moss grows freely over stone lanterns and paths. Yokai feel especially comfortable here, Nothing expects maintenance. Nothing asks for change. Growth and stillness coexist naturally. Their movements, if they occur at all, are slow and minimal. A shift of presence rather than a step. A settling rather than a crossing. Often, they remain completely still for long stretches of time. The night air carries faint scents of wood, earth, and distant water. These scents do not change quickly. They remain steady, grounding awareness gently, inviting relaxation without stimulation. The yokai are aware of these subtle changes, but they do not respond. Awareness does not always require action. Sometimes it simply rests. In these moments, the distinction between yokai and landscape becomes nearly invisible. They are not placed within the world. They are expressions of it, quiet forms of the night itself. Even memory begins to soften here. Stories lose their edges. Names become less important. What remains is a feeling, a calm continuity, a sense that nothing needs to be understood. The villages continue to sleep. The forest continues to breathe. The yokai continue to rest. Awareness drifts gently, no longer anchored to images or ideas. Sensation becomes simpler. Weight, temperature, breath. The presence of the yokai does not keep awareness awake. It supports rest. It reassures without explanation. It remains without insisting. The night grows deeper, not darker, but more settled. Everything that can rest does so. Everything that remains awake does so quietly. And within this shared stillness, sleep draws closer, arriving without announcement, carried gently by the calm presence of the yokai. As the night reaches its deepest calm, even the idea of yokai begins to soften. They are no longer felt as separate presences, no longer sensed as beings nearby. They become part of the quiet itself, indistinguishable from the stillness that surrounds everything. There is no movement now that requires attention, no sound that stands apart from silence. The forest, the villages, the night air all rest together, balanced and undisturbed. Awareness drifts gently, no longer following stories or images. Thoughts slow until they appear only as soft impressions, then fade without effort. Nothing holds them. Nothing needs to release them. The ground remains steady beneath everything. The earth supports quietly, without strain, as it always has. It holds weight, warmth, and rest with complete ease. Breathing continues naturally. Inhale, exhale. The space between breaths widens slightly, allowing rest to deepen further. Each breath arrives when it needs to. Each breath leaves without urgency. The night does not change. It does not progress. It simply remains. Time loosens its structure, becoming spacious and gentle. If awareness lingers anywhere, it rests in sensation rather than thought, the feeling of being supported, the calm of darkness, the softness of air. Nothing asks to be understood. Nothing asks to be remembered. The stories have already done their work. They no longer need to continue. The yokai remain, not as figures or ideas, but as part of the quiet balance of the world. Their presence is no longer noticed. It does not need to be. Sleep approaches without being invited. It arrives naturally, the way night settles over land and sea alike. The forest rests, the villages rest, awareness rests. And within this rest, everything continues exactly as it should, calm and uninterrupted. PART 5, the sea, spirits, and endless horizons. Beyond the forests and the sleeping villages, the land slowly opens. Trees thin out. The ground becomes flatter. The air changes. It grows heavier with moisture, carrying the faint scent of salt long before the sea itself is visible. Even at night, The ocean announces itself gently, not through sound at first, but through atmosphere. The sea does not rush. It does not reveal itself suddenly. It allows awareness to approach gradually, step by step, breath by breath. The rhythm of waves reaches the senses before the shoreline does, steady and unhurried, repeating without variation. Standing near the water at night feels different from standing anywhere else. The horizon disappears. The line between sky and sea dissolves into darkness. Distance becomes impossible to measure. The ocean does not offer landmarks. It offers openness. The surface of the water moves constantly, yet never seems busy. Waves rise and fall without effort, following patterns older than memory. Each one completes its movement fully, then releases it, allowing the next to arrive. In Japanese tradition, the sea is not empty. It is inhabited by quiet presences, spirits that do not surface, do not speak, do not interfere. They exist within depth rather than form. Their awareness is slow, expansive, and calm. These sea spirits do not drift aimlessly. They rest within currents, within temperature layers, within the gentle pull of the moon. They feel movement without resisting it. They accept motion as rest. At night, the ocean reflects almost nothing. Light dissolves before it reaches the surface. What remains is sound. The soft collapse of waves, the long pause between them, the repetition that requires no attention to follow. Breathing begins to align with this rhythm naturally. Inhale as a wave gathers, exhale as it releases. The body adjusts without instruction, finding comfort in predictability. The shore itself feels patient. Sand cools beneath the night air. Stones hold the warmth of the day a little longer, releasing it slowly. Nothing shifts quickly here. Everything transitions gently. The spirits of the sea do not approach the shore. They remain at a distance, not out of fear, but out of balance. The boundary between land and water is respected without agreement or thought. Some traditions speak of vast dragons beneath the surface, not as creatures that move or act, but as symbols of depth itself. Awareness stretched so wide and slow that it feels almost still. These dragons do not awaken. They do not sleep. They simply remain. The ocean does not react to presence. It does not acknowledge observation. It continues exactly as it would if no one were there. This indifference is calming. Nothing is expected. Nothing is required. The sound of the waves becomes more uniform as attention softens. Individual crashes blur together, forming a continuous, low rhythm that fills the background completely. Time loosens here. Minutes are indistinguishable. The sea does not mark passing moments. It repeats the same movement endlessly, without impatience, without variation. The night air grows cooler near the water. Each breath feels clean, steady, grounding. The scent of salt lingers gently, never sharp, never overwhelming. The sea spirits remain unseen, unfelt as individuals, but present as depth, as vastness, as continuity. They do not guide awareness. They support rest by their sheer stillness within motion. Standing here, there is nothing to follow, nothing to anticipate. The ocean offers only repetition, and within that repetition, deep calm. And as awareness settles further, the sound of the waves continues, steady and endless, carrying attention gently toward rest, without ever asking it to arrive. As awareness remains near the shoreline, the sea begins to feel less like a place and more like a presence. It does not approach, yet it fills the space completely. The steady movement of the water becomes a constant background, replacing thought with rhythm. Waves arrive one after another, each similar, each complete. They do not build toward anything. They do not seek variation. Their consistency is what makes them soothing, The ocean does not surprise, it repeats. The surface of the water reflects the night sky faintly, not as clear images, but as softened impressions. Stars blur into the movement, stretching and dissolving with each wave. Nothing holds its shape for long. Beneath the surface, layers of water move slowly past one another. Currents glide without friction. Temperatures shift gently, creating quiet boundaries that never collide. The sea spirits rest within these layers, not floating, not sinking, simply existing in balance. These spirits do not think in moments. They do not measure time. Their awareness stretches across wide distances, touching movement without focusing on detail. They sense the pull of the moon as a steady influence rather than a command. Far from the shore, where light never reaches, the ocean becomes even quieter. Sound fades into pressure. Motion becomes slower. The deeper the water, the more complete the stillness. Ancient stories speak of this depth not as darkness, but as rest. A place where movement slows to nearly nothing, where presence expands without effort, where nothing needs to change. The shoreline continues its gentle exchange. Water reaches land, then withdraws. Sand reshapes itself slightly, then settles again. Each wave leaves no lasting mark. The beach accepts everything without holding onto it. Breathing remains slow and even. The sound of the sea fills the pauses between breaths, creating a continuous flow that feels uninterrupted. There is no silence here, only a constant low presence. The sea does not react to attention. It does not become louder or softer. It remains consistent, reliable, steady. This steadiness invites rest. Thoughts, if they appear, feel distant now. They drift like reflections on water, briefly visible, then dissolving as the surface shifts. There is no need to follow them. The spirits of the sea do not guide awareness. They do not protect or warn. They simply remain, offering depth rather than direction. The night grows cooler. The air near the water carries moisture that settles gently on skin, barely noticeable, grounding attention in sensation rather than thought. Time continues to loosen. The repetition of waves replaces any sense of progress. There is only rhythm, only continuation. The horizon remains unseen. The sea extends beyond perception, vast and open. This openness does not feel empty. It feels complete. As awareness settles further, the ocean's movement becomes almost internal. The rhythm of waves aligns with the rhythm of breath and heartbeat, creating a single, slow pattern. The sea spirits remain deep below, undisturbed, resting within layers of water that never reach the surface. Their presence supports calm without asking to be noticed. And so the waves continue, one after another, steady and unchanging, carrying awareness gently, effortlessly, toward deeper rest. As the rhythm of the waves continues, awareness begins to drift farther from the shore, not physically, but gently, as if carried by the sound itself. The sea no longer feels nearby, it feels everywhere. The shoreline fades from importance. Sand, stones, and land settle into the background. What remains is the steady movement of water, repeating without variation, without intention. The surface of the ocean stretches outward into darkness. No edges, no markers. The night sky blends seamlessly into the sea, creating a single, vast space where distance no longer matters. Beneath the surface, the water grows calmer with depth. Movement slows gradually, layer by layer. The deeper the water, the less change is felt. Pressure increases gently, holding everything in place. The sea spirits rest here, far below any disturbance. They do not move through the water. They are part of it. Their awareness is wide and slow, touching currents without following them. There is no light in these depths, yet nothing feels hidden. The darkness is complete and even. It does not shift. It does not flicker. It remains stable, offering rest rather than mystery. Ancient stories describe this depth as a place of forgetting. Not loss, but release. Thoughts loosen. Identity softens. The sea holds everything without asking for names. Above, waves continue their endless rhythm. Down below, stillness deepens. These two states coexist without conflict, motion and rest layered together. Breathing feels heavier now, slower, deeper. Each inhale fills completely. Each exhale releases fully. The body follows the ocean's pace without effort. Time dissolves further. The repetition of waves removes any sense of sequence. There is no before or after, only continuation. The spirits remain unchanging. They do not awaken. They do not sleep. They exist in a state beyond both. Their presence is not felt directly, but as an absence of disturbance. Awareness drifts comfortably within this vastness. There is nothing to focus on, nothing to analyze. The sea offers no details to hold attention. The surface sounds grow more distant now, softened by depth. The ocean becomes a low, constant hum, steady and reassuring. Thoughts appear less frequently, and when they do, they feel weightless. They rise gently, then sink back into the calm without resistance. The sea does not demand surrender. It simply provides space, wide, open, and steady. Awareness settles naturally within it. Even the idea of spirits begins to soften. They are no longer distinct. They are depth itself, stillness shaped like water. The ocean remains endless, not moving toward anything, not waiting for anything, simply continuing. And within this continuation, awareness drifts further, carried gently by the slow, unchanging rhythm of the sea. As awareness settles fully into the rhythm of the sea, even the sense of drifting begins to fade. There is no longer movement toward or away from anything. There is only presence, held gently within the vast stillness of the water. The ocean continues its endless motion above, but down here, everything is quiet. Pressure is even. Temperature is steady. Nothing changes quickly. Nothing needs to. Breathing remains slow and natural. Inhale, exhale. The space between breaths widens, allowing rest to deepen without effort. The sound of waves becomes distant, almost abstract. Not a series of events, but a continuous, low vibration that fills the background completely. The sea spirits remain, no longer perceived as beings or presences, but as the depth itself, calm, expansive, and undisturbed. Their awareness is not separate from the water. It is the water. Thought dissolves further. Ideas lose their shape. There is no need to follow anything, no need to hold on. Time releases its structure. Moments no longer connect. Each one exists fully on its own, then gently fades. The ocean holds everything evenly, weightless, supported, resting. There is no boundary between awareness and environment now. No clear edge where one ends and the other begins. Everything exists within the same quiet space. The darkness here is soft and stable. It does not press inward. It opens outward, offering rest rather than concealment. Nothing stirs, nothing interrupts. The sea remains steady, endless, patient. Sleep approaches without being invited. It arrives the way water settles into depth, slowly and completely. The waves continue far above, repeating endlessly. Below, stillness holds everything gently. And within this stillness, awareness rests, supported by the calm, unchanging presence of the sea. Part 6: Sacred Fires and Ancient Rituals. After the vast openness of the sea, awareness slowly returns to land. Not abruptly, not with movement. It drifts inward, settling near places where people once gathered quietly after sunset, where flames were lit not to conquer darkness, but to soften it. Fire at night does not rush. A small flame breathes slowly, rising and falling with the air around it. It does not demand attention. It invites it gently, offering warmth, light, and a steady rhythm that never hurries. In ancient Japan, sacred fires were lit at shrines, along mountain paths, and near quiet villages. These fires were not meant to illuminate everything. They created pockets of light surrounded by calm darkness, allowing rest to exist beside awareness. A flame does not stay still, yet it never truly moves away. It dances within its place, repeating familiar motions over and over. Watching it requires no effort. The eyes soften. The mind follows without thinking. The spirits associated with fire are not loud or dramatic. They are patient. They remain close to the flame, not inside it, but alongside it. Their presence is felt as steadiness rather than heat. These spirits do not consume. They preserve. They hold space. Fire, in this sense, is not destruction. It is balance. It transforms without urgency, warming the air slowly, evenly. At night, a sacred fire creates a circle of quiet. Sounds outside the circle feel distant. Inside, everything slows. Breathing becomes deeper. Muscles release their tension naturally. The fire reflects softly in nearby surfaces. Stone glows faintly. Wood catches a gentle warmth. Shadows stretch and shorten in predictable rhythms, never startling, never sharp. Ancient rituals often involved sitting near fire without speaking. No chants, no movements, just presence. The fire did the work. People rested within its steady light, allowing thoughts to settle on their own. The spirits of fire do not ask for offerings. They do not require attention. They remain, whether observed or not, continuing their quiet work of holding warmth in the night. As awareness rests near the flame, time begins to slow again. Minutes stretch gently. There is no sense of waiting. The fire burns at its own pace, unconcerned with duration. Crackling sounds appear occasionally, soft and brief. They do not interrupt the calm, they confirm it. Each sound fades quickly, returning to stillness. The warmth of the fire spreads evenly, not hot, not cold, just enough to be felt, just enough to reassure. The darkness beyond the fire remains untouched. It does not retreat. It balances the light, creating a gentle contrast that feels complete rather than divided. The spirits remain close, quiet and steady, their awareness blending with the glow of the flame and the calm of the night air. And as attention settles further, the fire continues to burn slowly, steadily, offering warmth without demand, guiding awareness gently toward rest. As the fire continues to burn, its presence begins to feel less like something being watched and more like something being shared. The flame does not exist for observation. It exists for balance. It holds warmth in the night the way the earth holds roots beneath the surface. The circle of light around the fire feels stable, clearly defined, yet gentle at the edges. Darkness does not stop abruptly. It blends softly into the glow, creating a space that feels protected without being closed. The fire breathes slowly. Each movement follows the last without change or surprise. The flame rises slightly, then settles, rises again, then settles again. This repetition does not grow boring, it grows reassuring. Ancient fires were often tended carefully, not fed too quickly, not allowed to burn too brightly. A sacred fire was meant to last, not to flare. It was meant to accompany the night, not overpower it. Those who sat near such fires did not speak much. Words were unnecessary. The fire offered enough presence on its own. People listened to the small sounds of burning wood, to the gentle movement of air, to their own breathing slowing naturally. The spirits connected to fire are said to prefer this quiet companionship. They do not arrive suddenly. They do not announce themselves. They remain close as long as the flame remains steady and respected. Their presence feels grounding, heavy in a comforting way, like warmth settling into muscles that have carried the day for too long. The fire does not pull attention upward. It draws it downward, into the body, into stillness. Sparks occasionally rise from the flame, drifting upward briefly before fading into darkness. They do not disturb the calm. They complete it. Each spark appears, glows softly, then disappears without trace. The warmth spreads slowly, evenly. It does not rush across the skin. It arrives gradually, allowing the body to accept it without adjustment. Shoulders soften. Hands rest more comfortably. The spine releases its effort. Firelight changes the way shadows move. They no longer feel sharp or defined. They stretch lazily, then return. This movement feels predictable, almost rhythmic, creating a visual pattern that encourages the eyes to relax. In ancient rituals, fire was often watched until thought grew tired of following it. At that point, awareness would drift on its own, no longer attached to the flame, yet still supported by its presence. The fire does not demand attention to remain meaningful. Even when awareness drifts elsewhere, the flame continues its quiet work, burning, warming, holding space. Outside the circle of light, the night remains unchanged. Forests rest. Villages sleep. The world continues without interruption. The fire does not separate itself from this larger calm. It belongs to it. The spirits of fire are not concerned with time. They do not measure how long the flame has burned or how much remains. They exist within the moment that repeats itself endlessly. Crackles appear now and then, gentle and brief. They fade quickly, leaving behind silence that feels fuller than before. Nothing lingers, nothing echoes. Breathing grows heavier, deeper. Each inhale feels warm. Each exhale releases tension gently, without instruction. The fire mirrors this rhythm, steady and unhurried. Thoughts become less frequent. When they appear, they feel distant, softened by the glow. They pass through awareness like sparks through air, briefly visible, then gone. The sacred fire continues to burn, not to guide, not to teach, but to accompany. It remains as long as it is needed, and even longer when it is not. The spirits remain close, quiet, and patient, content within the slow rhythm of flame and night. And as awareness settles further, the fire continues exactly as it always has, steady and calm, offering warmth and rest without asking anything in return. As the fire burns lower, its movement becomes slower, more deliberate. The flames no longer rise high. They remain close to the wood, glowing rather than dancing. This change does not signal an ending. It signals deepening. The light around the fire grows softer. Shadows move more gradually now, stretching and returning with less contrast. The night feels closer, but not heavier. It simply settles in more completely. The warmth remains steady. It no longer spreads outward. It rests in place, holding the space gently. The body responds by growing heavier, more relaxed, as if gravity itself has softened. Ancient rituals often ended not with words, but with silence. People would remain near the fire long after its purpose had been fulfilled, allowing the quiet to do the rest. The fire was trusted to guide awareness toward rest on its own. The spirits of fire do not leave as the flames lower. They remain present, comfortable with embers as much as with flame. They understand that fire does not disappear, it transforms. Embers glow softly beneath layers of ash, pulsing faintly, rhythmically. Their light is slower, steadier, almost breathing. Watching them requires no focus. Awareness drifts naturally. The scent of burning wood changes as the fire settles. It becomes deeper, warmer, less sharp. The air feels fuller, heavier with calm. Occasionally, a small shift occurs within the embers. A quiet sound, a gentle collapse. It does not interrupt rest. It confirms that the fire continues to live quietly. The circle of light shrinks slightly, but it remains complete. Darkness does not rush in. It approaches slowly, respectfully, blending with the glow rather than replacing it. Breathing becomes slower still. Each breath seems to take more time to arrive, more time to leave. There is no effort in this slowing. The body simply follows the atmosphere of the night. Thoughts feel distant now, almost irrelevant. When they appear, they do not hold attention. They fade before fully forming, dissolving into warmth and quiet. The spirits remain steady, their presence grounded and calm. They do not guide, they do not withdraw. They simply remain, holding the balance between warmth and darkness. Time loosens further. The fire no longer marks moments. There is no sense of how long it has burned. Duration loses its meaning. The night outside the fire remains unchanged. Wind may pass quietly. Trees may settle. None of it draws attention inward. Everything continues gently. The sacred fire has done its work, not by acting, but by remaining, by offering steadiness long enough for awareness to follow. As the embers continue their slow glow, awareness sinks deeper into rest, supported by warmth that asks nothing, guided by light that does not insist. The fire has now settled almost completely into embers. There are no tall flames left, only a steady, gentle glow resting quietly at the center of the night. The light no longer moves quickly. It pulses softly as if breathing on its own. The warmth remains, calm and even. It no longer spreads outward. It simply exists, holding the space in quiet balance. The body rests within this warmth without effort, supported and heavy. The darkness around the embers feels complete and stable. It does not press inward. It surrounds gently, offering rest rather than concealment. Light and darkness exist together without contrast. The spirits of fire remain present, but they are no longer felt as distinct. They blend into the calm warmth, into the steady glow, into the quiet of the night itself. Sound has nearly disappeared. Any remaining crackle is soft and brief, fading immediately back into silence. The silence that follows feels full and comforting. Breathing continues slowly, naturally. Inhale, pause, exhale, pause. The space between breaths widens, allowing awareness to settle further and further. Thought has almost completely softened now. Ideas no longer form clearly. When they arise, they dissolve before needing attention. Nothing holds the mind awake. Time no longer has structure. There is no sense of before or after. The embers glow in an endless present, steady and unchanging. The ground beneath feels firm and reliable. The earth holds everything without effort, just as it always has. There is no need to adjust or move. The fire does not end, it rests. Even as embers slowly cool, their presence remains, quiet and complete. The night continues without interruption. Forests rest. Villages remain asleep. The world moves forward gently, without urgency. Awareness sinks deeper into this stillness, no longer separate from warmth, darkness, or rest. Sleep arrives naturally, without being invited. It settles the way embers fade into ash, slowly and peacefully. Nothing remains to be done. Nothing needs to be understood. The fire rests, the night rests, and awareness rests with it. PART-7, the sky, stars, and silent watchers. As the warmth of the fire fades into rest, awareness begins to lift gently upward, not by moving the body, not by effort, but by attention slowly expanding beyond the ground, beyond the trees, beyond the edges of the land itself. The sky waits above, wide and patient, unchanged by what happens below. At night, the sky does not announce itself. It is already there, vast, open, and steady. It holds everything without reacting. Clouds drift when they choose. Stars remain where they are. Nothing rushes. Looking upward, the sense of distance softens. The sky feels close and far at the same time. It stretches endlessly, yet it feels intimate, familiar, like something that has always been present, even when unnoticed. Stars appear quietly, one by one, as the darkness deepens. They do not brighten suddenly. They emerge gently, settling into visibility. Each one holds its place, without movement, without sound. In ancient Japanese tradition, the sky was not empty. It was watched, not by eyes, but by awareness itself. The stars were not seen as decorations, but as silent markers of continuity, always there, always steady. Some stars feel closer than others, not physically, but emotionally. Their light feels calm, unchanging. It has traveled for so long that urgency has disappeared completely by the time it arrives. Between the stars, darkness remains. Not a lack, but a presence. The dark space holds the sky together, allowing light to exist without overwhelming it. This balance feels natural and complete. The moon, when visible, moves slowly across the sky. Its light is soft, indirect, reflected rather than produced. It does not dominate. It guides gently, shaping shadows without forcing them. The sky does not demand observation. One does not need to follow constellations or remember names. Simply resting beneath it is enough. The sky holds attention lightly, allowing it to drift. Breathing slows as the gaze rests upward. The chest rises and falls gently, mirroring the quiet openness above. There is space here, so much space that thought has room to dissolve. The silent watchers of the sky are not beings that move or act. They are awareness itself, stretched across distance and time. The feeling that the sky has seen countless nights like this one, and will see countless more. Nothing about the sky changes in response to presence. It does not lean closer. It does not pull away. It remains exactly as it is, steady and reliable. Clouds may pass slowly, reshaping the view. Stars fade behind them, then return. This change feels gentle, temporary, unimportant. The sky remains behind it all. Time feels different beneath the stars, longer, softer, less structured. Minutes lose their edges. The night stretches comfortably. Thoughts begin to feel small beneath the sky's vastness. Not unimportant, just lighter, easier to release. They drift like clouds, passing through awareness without staying. The stars do not flicker with urgency. Their light is constant, calm. They offer no message, no demand, only presence. The sky holds everything quietly: fire, sea, forest, village. All of it rests beneath this same open expanse, connected without effort. As awareness settles into this openness, the sky continues to watch, not actively, not consciously, but through its unchanging existence. And beneath it, rest deepens naturally, supported by the vast, silent calm that has always been there. As awareness remains lifted toward the sky, the sense of openness grows deeper. The sky does not end at what can be seen. It extends far beyond vision, far beyond imagination, holding space without boundaries. The stars remain steady, scattered gently across the darkness. They do not form patterns unless the mind seeks them. Left alone, they are simply points of calm light, resting where they are. Ancient observers often sat quietly beneath the night sky, not to measure it, not to understand it, but to feel its presence. The sky did not answer questions, it absorbed them. The moon continues its slow passage, barely noticeable unless attention rests upon it. Its movement is so gradual that it feels almost still. Change here happens on a scale that invites patience. Light from the stars travels without hurry. By the time it reaches the ground, it carries no urgency, no message, only the calm persistence of distance. Between each breath, space expands. The pause after exhaling feels longer now, wider. The body rests within this pause comfortably, without needing to hurry toward the next inhale. Clouds may drift across the sky, softening the light further. Their movement is slow, unforced. When stars fade behind them, nothing is lost. When they return, nothing is gained. The silent watchers of the sky are not separate entities. They are the quiet awareness that remains when attention stops reaching outward. They do not observe, they allow. The vastness above begins to feel internal. The same openness that exists in the sky is felt within awareness itself. Spacious, uncluttered, calm. Thoughts arise less frequently now. When they do, they feel small and distant, like faint points of light that fade without effort. The sky offers no direction. It does not suggest where to look or what to notice. It remains open, allowing attention to settle wherever it naturally rests. Temperature shifts gently as night deepens. The air cools slightly, then stabilizes. The body adjusts without conscious thought, resting more deeply. Time stretches further. There is no sense of progression, only continuation. The sky remains unchanged while everything beneath it settles. Stars do not compete with one another. Each one holds its place quietly, contributing to the whole without drawing focus. The moon's light shapes the night softly, outlining clouds, touching land, reflecting faintly on distant surfaces. It does not disturb, it reassures. Awareness feels lighter now, less anchored to the body, less concerned with location. Rest spreads evenly. The sky continues to exist exactly as it always has, vast, calm, unresponsive to urgency. And beneath this endless openness, attention settles naturally, held gently by the quiet presence of stars and the deep stillness they bring. The sky remains unchanged as the night continues. It does not grow darker or lighter in any noticeable way. It simply remains, holding its vastness without effort. Stars feel farther away now, not because they move, but because attention no longer reaches toward them. They exist without needing to be followed. The feeling of being beneath the sky becomes more pronounced. The sense of gravity feels softer, as if the body is gently supported by the night itself. The silence above feels deeper than silence on the ground. It is not the absence of sound, but presence of calm stretched across distance. Ancient stories spoke of the sky as a mirror of the inner state. When the mind quiets, the sky feels wider. When thought fades, the sky feels endless. Breathing continues at a slow, even pace. Each inhale arrives quietly. Each exhale leaves without trace. The pauses between breaths grow longer, more comfortable. The moon, if present, no longer draws attention. Its light blends completely into the night, becoming part of the background rather than a focal point. Clouds, thin and faint, pass almost unnoticed. Their movement is too slow to interrupt rest. Awareness no longer moves upward. It settles into stillness, resting within the openness rather than observing it. Thoughts dissolve before forming words. Images soften. Memory loosens its hold. The stars remain silent, unchanged, unconcerned. They have watched countless nights like this one, and countless rests like this one. Time feels wide and empty. There is no sense of duration, only continuation. The body feels distant now, heavier, more grounded. Sensations fade into the background, replaced by a sense of calm weight. The sky holds everything without distinction. Past and future lose their shape here. The silent watchers remain, not as figures, but as the quiet awareness that remains when attention stops reaching outward. The vastness above begins to feel indistinguishable from the vastness within. Both are open, both are still. Nothing needs to be noticed anymore. Nothing needs to be understood. The sky does not change. It does not respond. It simply remains, allowing rest to deepen without interruption. And beneath it, awareness continues to soften, drifting naturally toward deeper, quieter sleep. The sky no longer feels distant. It no longer feels above. It simply exists as a wide, quiet presence that surrounds everything without boundaries. Stars remain in place, but they are no longer points of focus. Their light blends into the darkness, becoming part of a single, continuous calm. The silence feels complete now, not empty, not fragile, full and steady, like a soft layer resting over the night. Breathing continues on its own, slow and even. Inhale, pause, exhale, pause. Each pause feels longer, deeper, more restful. The body feels heavy and still, as if gently anchored to the ground. There is no need to adjust, no reason to move. The moon's presence fades into the background completely. Light and shadow lose their contrast, blending into a soft, uniform night. Thought has nearly disappeared. There are no clear images, no distinct ideas, only a quiet awareness drifting without effort. Time dissolves. There is no sense of passing moments. The night stretches endlessly, calm and unchanging. The sky remains vast, but it no longer needs to be perceived. It holds everything without attention. The silent watchers remain as quiet presence, indistinguishable from the stillness itself. The world rests beneath the sky. Mountains, seas, forests, and villages all remain still, wrapped in the same calm darkness. Awareness settles deeper, sinking gently into rest, supported by the steady openness that never shifts. Nothing remains to be done. Nothing needs to be followed. Sleep arrives naturally, slowly, like darkness deepening without effort. The sky remains, and rest continues. PART8, forests and night. As the openness of the sky fades gently into rest, Awareness begins to settle downward again. Not suddenly, not with intention. It drifts slowly, returning to the surface of the land, where the night has already settled among trees. The forest at night does not announce itself. It does not shift when attention arrives. It has already been there, breathing quietly, long before it was noticed. Trees stand close together, their forms softened by darkness. Trunks rise steadily from the ground, straight and patient. Branches extend outward and upward, overlapping gently, creating a ceiling of leaves that filters what little light remains. Moonlight enters the forest unevenly. Some places receive it. Others remain untouched. This unevenness feels natural, comforting. The forest does not need to be fully seen to be fully present. The air is cooler here, heavier with scent. Damp earth, moss, bark, leaves resting on leaves. Each smell is subtle, layered, never sharp. Breathing deepens naturally in response. The forest is never silent, yet it is always quiet. Sounds exist without drawing attention. A distant movement, a leaf settling, the soft creak of wood adjusting to temperature. Nothing sudden, nothing urgent. In Japanese tradition, forests are not empty spaces. They are inhabited, but not crowded. Presence here is gentle, restrained. Kami do not appear. They remain felt rather than seen. They do not move through the forest. They are the forest, the space between trees, the weight of air, the patience of roots beneath the ground. Paths through the forest are narrow and unassuming. They do not demand to be followed. They exist simply because movement once passed through them, slowly, many times. Walking is not required. Observing is not required. The forest allows stillness. It holds it easily. The ground beneath feels soft and uneven. Layers of fallen leaves cushion each step, absorbing sound. Even movement here feels quiet. Shadows are deep but not threatening. They rest between trees, stable and unmoving. Darkness here does not hide, it shelters. Lanterns, when present, are few and far apart. Their light barely reaches beyond their immediate space. They illuminate just enough to reassure, never enough to dominate. The forest breathes slowly, not as a sound, but as a rhythm. A subtle expansion and release felt rather than heard. Time behaves differently here. Moments stretch. The sense of duration loosens. There is no clear beginning or end to being in the forest. One simply is. Ancient stories speak of travelers who entered forests at night and forgot why they were walking. Not because they were lost, but because the need to arrive somewhere faded. The forest does not distract, it dissolves intention. Leaves above shift slightly as air moves through them. The sound is soft, repetitive, almost circular. It does not lead anywhere. It returns to itself. Roots beneath the ground remain unseen, woven together, holding the forest steady. They do not rush. They do not compete. They simply remain connected. Awareness begins to feel heavier now, more grounded. The openness of the sky has become enclosure, but not confinement, a gentle holding. Thought slows naturally, not because it is forced, but because it has nowhere urgent to go. The forest does not respond to observation. It does not reveal secrets. It remains consistent, reliable, unchanged by attention. The presence of Kami here is not dramatic. It is the feeling that nothing is out of place, that everything rests where it belongs. Even animals move quietly at night, careful not to disturb the balance. When they pass, their presence is brief, almost imagined. Stillness grows thicker, deeper. It settles between breaths, between heartbeats. The forest holds this stillness without effort. It has held it for centuries. Awareness rests within it now, supported by darkness, by scent, by quiet continuity. Nothing needs to be followed. Nothing needs to be understood. The forest remains, and rest deepens naturally within it. The forest remains still as the night deepens. It does not change its behavior. It simply continues to exist, steady and patient, holding its quiet rhythm. Darkness between the trees grows slightly heavier, not darker, but more complete. It fills the spaces evenly, smoothing edges and softening shapes. The air feels cooler now, settling closer to the ground. Moisture clings lightly to leaves and bark, adding weight to the stillness. Breathing slows in response, becoming deeper and more even. Each inhale draws in the forest's calm. Each exhale releases any remaining tension without effort. Sounds are distant and scattered. A faint movement far away, the subtle settling of branches. None of it forms a pattern that needs attention. The forest floor remains layered and soft. Leaves overlap, creating a quiet cushion that absorbs sound and movement. Even imagined footsteps fade quickly. In ancient belief, forests were places where boundaries softened, not places of danger, but of transition, a space where urgency naturally dissolved. Kami remain present without visibility. They do not observe. They do not intervene. They simply remain woven into the stillness of the place. Paths feel less defined now. The idea of direction loses importance. There is no need to move forward or back. Stillness feels complete. Moonlight, when it enters, appears in narrow bands, touching only what it needs to touch. It does not reveal more than necessary. Tree trunks stand quietly, their surfaces rough and familiar. They do not shift. They do not respond. They remain steady and reliable. Time continues to stretch. Minutes pass without being noticed. The forest does not mark time. It absorbs it. Awareness settles lower, closer to the ground. Thoughts thin out, becoming infrequent and vague. The forest does not require attention to exist. It remains even when unobserved. Wind moves lightly through the canopy, creating a soft, repetitive sound. It does not build. It does not change direction abruptly. Roots beneath the ground hold everything in place. They connect tree to tree, ground to ground, forming a quiet network of stability. The presence of life here is subtle. Insects rest, animals pause, everything waits without tension. Stillness becomes the dominant sensation, not emptiness, but fullness without movement. The forest holds this stillness easily. It does not resist it. Awareness feels heavier now, supported by the ground, by the darkness, by the quiet continuity of trees. Thought becomes unnecessary. Attention drifts without purpose. The forest remains unchanged, patient, and calm. And within it, rest continues to deepen, slow and uninterrupted. The forest holds its shape as the night progresses. Nothing shifts suddenly. Nothing signals change. It remains steady, grounded in its quiet rhythm. Darkness feels deeper now, not heavier, but more uniform. Shapes blur slightly, allowing the eyes to rest without searching for detail. The air remains cool and still. Moisture settles gently on leaves, on bark, on the ground itself. Everything feels slightly weighted, anchored. Breathing continues slowly, evenly, without conscious control. Each breath blends into the atmosphere, unnoticed and effortless. Sounds have grown even more distant. Any movement feels far away, softened by layers of trees and leaves. Silence expands between these faint sounds. Paths are no longer clearly imagined. Direction dissolves completely. There is no sense of forward or backward, only presence. Ancient forests were often left untouched, not out of fear, but out of respect. These spaces were allowed to remain as they were, undisturbed and complete. Kami are present here not as watchers, but as balance. They exist in the way nothing feels out of place. Trees do not compete for space. They grow where they can, adjusting slowly over time, never rushing. The forest floor remains layered and soft, absorbing all weight and sound. Even imagined movement disappears into it. Moonlight fades further now, becoming faint and indirect. Darkness fills the remaining space evenly, without contrast. The sense of time loosens further. Moments blend together, losing definition. Awareness settles deeper, closer to stillness. Thought becomes faint, occasional, easily released. The forest does not change to reflect attention. It remains consistent, patient, unresponsive to observation. The canopy above feels stable, protective. Branches overlap gently, holding the space together. Wind has almost completely stilled. Leaves barely move. The air feels suspended. Life within the forest rests quietly. Everything pauses together. Stillness feels complete now, not fragile, not temporary. It settles fully into the space. The forest has no need to guide. It allows rest naturally. Awareness drifts further inward, supported by darkness, by quiet, by the steady presence of trees. Nothing remains to be followed. The forest remains. And rest deepens naturally within it. The forest now feels completely settled. Nothing shifts. Nothing draws attention. The space feels finished, whole, and steady. Darkness rests evenly between the trees, no longer deepening, no longer changing. It simply remains, calm and consistent. The air feels still and balanced. Temperature no longer shifts. The forest has reached a quiet equilibrium. Breathing continues softly, naturally. Each breath moves in and out without sound, without effort. Thought has almost completely faded. There is no clear narrative, no sequence of ideas. Only quiet awareness remains. The presence of Kami blends fully into the environment. There is no separation between spirit and place. Everything rests as one. The forest floor feels distant now, yet supportive. Weight is held without pressure. Time has lost its structure. There is no sense of progression or waiting. The canopy above no longer registers as separate shapes. It feels like a single, continuous shelter. Silence feels full and reassuring. It does not invite attention. It allows rest. Nothing within the forest seeks movement. Everything remains exactly where it is meant to be. Awareness sinks deeper, settling into stillness without resistance. Sleep arrives slowly, gently, without announcement. The forest continues to exist, unchanged, patient, and quiet. And within it, rest remains uninterrupted. PART 9, Mist, Fog, and Quiet Paths. As the forest settles fully into stillness, something subtle begins to change. Not a movement, not a sound, but a soft thickening of the air. Mist forms quietly, without direction, without urgency. It does not roll in, it does not arrive. It simply becomes present, filling the spaces between trees, between breaths, between moments. The fog does not obscure, it softens. Edges fade, distances shorten. What was far now feels close, and what was close blends gently into the surrounding air. Paths through the forest become less defined. Their borders dissolve, but they do not disappear. They remain felt rather than seen. The mist moves slowly, guided by no visible force. It drifts where space allows, settling low to the ground, rising gently where warmth lingers. Sound changes within the fog. Everything feels quieter, not because sound stops, but because it travels less. Each noise fades quickly, absorbed by the air. Breathing synchronizes with the mist. Inhale draws in cool, damp air. Exhale releases warmth that disappears almost immediately. The fog holds the forest gently. Trees appear and fade depending on distance. Nothing is revealed all at once. Nothing demands attention. In Japanese myth, mist is a boundary, not between danger and safety, but between awareness and rest, a place where clarity is not required. Kami move easily within mist. They are not hidden by it. They are carried by it, present without form. Lantern light, when it exists, becomes soft and diffused. It spreads outward without edges, creating small islands of calm within the fog. The ground feels closer now, softer underfoot. Leaves and soil hold moisture, quieting every movement. The sense of direction fades further. The idea of destination dissolves. Only the gentle continuation of presence remains. The fog does not thicken suddenly. It grows slowly, evenly, allowing awareness to adjust without effort. Time feels less structured here. Moments stretch and overlap, blending together softly. Thought becomes vague and unimportant. Images blur before forming clearly. The mist does not conceal anything essential. It simply removes unnecessary detail. Awareness drifts with it, neither leading nor following, held gently in place. The forest remains beneath the fog, steady and unchanged. Only perception shifts. And within this softened space, rest deepens naturally, supported by air that asks nothing and paths that lead nowhere in particular. The mist continues to settle, evenly and without intention. It does not gather in one place more than another. It simply fills the forest with a soft, quiet presence. Trees appear closer now, their shapes muted and simplified. Details fade gently, leaving only what is necessary to be sensed. Paths feel shorter within the fog. Distance loses its meaning. A few steps forward feel the same as standing still. The air feels heavier with moisture, yet comfortable. It rests against the skin lightly, cooling and calming. Sound becomes softer still. Even imagined movement feels distant, absorbed quickly by the mist. Breathing remains slow and even. Each breath feels deeper, fuller, then disappears into the air without trace. Lantern light, when present, barely travels. It creates a soft glow that does not reveal edges or direction. It exists only as reassurance. The fog creates a sense of enclosure without confinement. Space feels smaller, yet safer. Nothing extends beyond awareness. In ancient stories, fog was seen as a gentle veil, not meant to confuse, but to protect. A pause between clarity and rest. Kami do not stand apart within the mist. They blend fully into it. Their presence is felt as balance, not form. The forest floor feels damp and quiet. Leaves cling together, holding moisture, holding stillness. Movement feels unnecessary. Stillness feels complete. The fog moves slowly, shifting subtly without pattern. It never rushes. It never stops. Time continues to soften. Minutes lose their edges. Sequence fades. Thought becomes less frequent. When it appears, it dissolves almost immediately, blurred by the same softness that surrounds everything. The mist does not demand attention. It allows awareness to rest without effort. The forest remains steady beneath the fog. Nothing about it changes. Awareness drifts gently, suspended in this softened space. Nothing needs to be seen clearly. Nothing needs to be understood. The fog continues to hold the night quietly. And within it, rest deepens naturally. The fog now feels fully settled. It no longer thickens or thins. It simply remains, evenly distributed through the forest, resting quietly in place. Visibility is limited, but this no longer matters. The need to see clearly has faded completely. Trees appear only when close, then soften and disappear again as distance increases. This gentle appearing and fading feels natural and calming. Paths are no longer visual. They exist only as a sense of openness beneath the feet, guiding nothing in particular. The air remains cool and damp, carrying a steady calm. Moisture clings lightly to everything it touches. Sound feels almost entirely absorbed. Even distant movement fades before reaching awareness. Breathing continues slowly, evenly, unforced. Each breath blends into the fog, indistinguishable from the air itself. The fog creates a quiet intimacy. Space feels close and contained without pressure. In myth, such spaces were seen as thresholds, not places to cross, but places to rest between states. Kami presence is subtle and constant, felt as steadiness rather than awareness. Light, when it exists, spreads without edges. It does not reveal or conceal. It simply exists. The forest beneath the mist remains unchanged, grounded and patient. Time feels suspended here. There is no forward movement, no waiting. Thought is rare now. When it appears, it dissolves quickly, leaving no trace. Awareness drifts slowly, without direction, supported by the softness of the air. Nothing calls for attention. Nothing pulls awareness outward. The fog holds everything gently, without tension. And within this quiet enclosure, rest continues to deepen naturally. The fog remains unchanged and steady. It does not drift away. It does not gather further. It rests exactly as it is, holding the forest in a soft, quiet stillness. Edges have completely softened now. Shapes no longer demand recognition. Awareness no longer reaches outward to identify or label anything. The air feels evenly cool, evenly damp. It rests against the skin without pressure, without contrast. Breathing continues at a slow, natural rhythm. Inhale, pause, exhale, pause. Each pause feels slightly longer, slightly deeper. Sound has almost entirely disappeared. Silence does not feel empty. It feels full, stable, and reliable. The fog creates a sense of gentle enclosure. Space feels close and protective, allowing awareness to remain inward without effort. The forest beneath the mist remains steady, unchanged, grounded. Trees stand quietly, their roots holding everything in place. Paths no longer exist as routes. They exist only as the idea of gentle openness beneath awareness. Time has lost its structure. There is no sequence, no before, no after, only a continuous present. Thought has nearly faded completely. There are no clear images, no words forming. Awareness drifts without content. The presence of Kami blends seamlessly into the fog, into the air, into the stillness. There is no separation. Light, if present, is diffuse and soft, spreading evenly without edges or contrast. The world feels paused, not stopped, but resting. Nothing needs to move, nothing needs to change. Awareness sinks deeper into this quiet enclosure, supported by softness, by stillness, by the steady presence of the fog. Sleep settles naturally, without effort, without transition. The mist remains, the forest remains, and rest continues uninterrupted. PART 10. Shrines without visitors. As the mist slowly thins, not disappearing but loosening, shapes begin to settle into clarity again. The forest remains, but something within it feels more intentional now, a sense of quiet structure resting patiently among the trees. A shrine stands ahead, not revealed suddenly, but gradually. Its presence is felt before it is seen. The air around it feels slightly more still, slightly more grounded. There are no visitors here, no footsteps, no voices. The shrine exists without audience, complete in its solitude. Wooden pillars rise calmly from the ground, darkened by time and weather. Their surfaces are smooth in places, rough in others, shaped slowly by years of wind and rain. The Torii gate stands quietly at the entrance, marking nothing dramatic. It does not announce a crossing. It simply acknowledges that the space beyond is different in feeling, not in function. The ground near the shrine feels carefully tended, yet untouched. Leaves rest where they fall. Stones remain where they were placed long ago. Lanterns line the path, unlit or glowing faintly. Their presence is symbolic rather than functional. They do not guide, they reassure. The shrine breathes quietly with the forest around it. There is no separation between sacred and natural here. Wood, stone, air, and silence blend seamlessly. In the absence of visitors, the shrine feels more complete. It does not wait. It does not expect. It exists. Kami presence here is subtle and steady, not focused in one place, not tied to an object. It fills the space evenly, like calm awareness resting gently. Ropes hang loosely, unmoving. Paper streamers rest quietly, untouched by wind. Nothing stirs unnecessarily. The structure does not demand attention. It does not invite prayer or ritual. It allows rest. Time feels slower here, but not heavier. Moments stretch without pressure. There is no sense of urgency or purpose. The shrine has witnessed countless nights like this one, long stretches of quiet, broken only by weather, by seasons, by time passing gently. The forest around it protects the space naturally. Trees stand close, offering shelter without enclosure. Sound feels distant and muted. Even the forest seems to lower its volume here. Breathing deepens again, responding to the stillness. Each breath feels measured, calm, complete. The shrine does not respond to observation. It remains exactly as it is, unchanged by presence or absence. Thought slows further. There is no narrative here, no story unfolding, only space. The sense of being watched does not exist. Instead, there is a feeling of being held, quietly and without judgment. The shrine rests within the night, and the night rests within it. Awareness settles naturally into this balanced stillness, supported by wood, stone, air, and silence. Nothing needs to be offered. Nothing needs to be asked. The shrine remains, and rest deepens quietly within it. The shrine remains completely still. It does not feel abandoned. It feels rested, as if it has been allowed to exist without interruption for a very long time. The wooden floor beneath the covered area feels cool and smooth. It carries the weight of countless quiet moments, each one settling gently into the grain of the wood. Air moves slowly here, barely noticeable. It passes through open spaces, between pillars, beneath the roof, without creating sound. Paper offerings hang motionless, their edges soft and worn. They do not flutter, they rest. Stone steps leading up to the shrine feel solid and familiar. Each step has been shaped gradually by time, not by force. There is no sense of arrival. Being here feels the same as having always been here. The shrine does not separate the sacred from the ordinary. It allows both to exist together, quietly and without contrast. Kami presence feels evenly distributed, not focused or concentrated. It is felt as balance rather than awareness. The surrounding forest seems to pause respectfully. Sounds grow faint, distant, almost absent. Lanterns remain unlit, yet the space does not feel dark. Soft ambient light settles naturally, enough to feel grounded. Breathing becomes slower again. Each inhale feels complete. Each exhale releases without effort. Thought continues to thin. Ideas no longer connect into sequences. They appear briefly, then fade. Time behaves differently within the shrine's space. It stretches without direction, without markers. The roof above feels protective but light. It shelters without enclosing. Nothing in the shrine asks to be touched. Nothing asks to be noticed. The absence of people feels intentional, as if this quiet was prepared long ago. The shrine remains steady through seasons, through nights, through silence. Awareness feels heavy now, comfortably grounded. There is no need to move, no need to remain still. Stillness simply happens. The shrine does not offer guidance, it offers space. And within this space, rest continues to deepen naturally. The shrine feels even more settled now, as if the night itself has fully wrapped around it. Nothing shifts, nothing waits. Everything simply remains, held gently in place by silence. The air inside the shrine space feels slightly cooler, more stable. It moves so slowly that it is barely felt, passing between pillars, beneath the roof, without creating any sound. Wood absorbs the quiet. Every surface seems to hold layers of stillness accumulated over many nights like this one. The floor does not creak. The beams do not respond. They rest. The absence of visitors feels complete. There is no expectation of footsteps, no memory of voices. The space does not feel empty. It feels finished. Ropes hang loosely, untouched. Their fibers are soft with age, shaped by years of weather and calm handling. Paper streamers remain still, their edges resting naturally. The shrine does not guide attention anywhere specific. There is no focal point that demands observation. Awareness is allowed to spread evenly across the space. Kami presence continues to feel subtle and constant, not as a presence watching, but as a quiet agreement that everything is in balance. The forest surrounding the shrine feels slightly distant now, as if sound and movement have been gently pushed outward. The shrine holds its own pocket of calm. Breathing slows further. Each breath feels deeper, heavier, more complete. The pause after each breath lingers comfortably. Time feels suspended here, not paused, not stopped, but softened until it loses its shape. Thought becomes rare. When it appears, it feels incomplete, fading before it can form fully. The shrine does not require ritual. It does not expect offerings or gestures. Its purpose is fulfilled by quiet existence alone. Lanterns remain dark, yet the space feels gently illuminated by ambient nightlight. Shadows soften, losing definition. The roof above feels steady and protective. It shelters without enclosing, allowing air and silence to pass freely. The ground beneath feels firm and reliable. Weight is held without pressure. Nothing in the shrine reacts to awareness. It remains unchanged, patient, and calm. The night continues quietly outside, but it feels far away now. Awareness sinks deeper into this stillness, no longer searching, no longer observing. The shrine remains, and rest continues to deepen, slow and uninterrupted. The shrine remains exactly as it is. Nothing changes. Nothing needs to change. The space has settled into a deep, stable stillness that feels complete and self-sustaining. Darkness rests evenly throughout the shrine. It does not deepen or lift. It simply remains, soft and consistent, touching wood, stone, and air equally. The air feels balanced now, neither cool nor warm. It moves so slowly that it feels almost suspended, as if the night itself is holding its breath. Breathing continues on its own, slow and even. Inhale, pause. Exhale, pause. Each pause stretches slightly longer than the last, allowing awareness to sink deeper. The shrine no longer feels like a structure. It feels like a quiet shape within the night, inseparable from the forest that surrounds it. Kami presence blends completely into the space. There is no distinction between spirit, wood, air, or silence. Everything exists as one quiet field. Sound has almost completely disappeared. Any remaining noise feels distant and unimportant, fading immediately back into stillness. The wooden beams above feel steady and timeless. They have held countless nights like this one, unchanged by seasons or years. The floor beneath feels supportive and reliable. Weight is held gently, without pressure or effort. Time has lost all sense of progression. There is no feeling of waiting, no awareness of duration. Only a continuous present. Thought has nearly vanished. There are no images, no words, no direction. Awareness drifts quietly without content. Lanterns remain dark, but the space does not feel dim. Ambient nightlight fills everything evenly. The shrine does not ask for attention. It does not ask for understanding. It allows rest. The forest beyond the shrine feels distant now, as if sound and movement have been gently wrapped away. Stillness feels complete, unbroken and stable. Awareness settles deeper, sinking naturally into this calm enclosure. Sleep arrives gently, without transition, without announcement. The shrine remains, the night remains, and rest continues, long and uninterrupted. PART 11, Bells, Wind, and Time. The night remains calm, settled into a deep and steady stillness. Nothing presses forward, nothing pulls attention. The world feels wide, slow, and patient. Somewhere beyond the quiet shrine, beyond the trees and the paths, a bell hangs in open space. It is not placed for ceremony. It is not there to call or to warn. It exists simply to respond. The bell does not move on its own. It waits. It rests in perfect stillness, suspended gently from weathered wood. Time passes around it without leaving a mark. The metal of the bell feels cool and heavy, shaped long ago by hands that worked slowly and carefully. Its surface carries subtle imperfections, softened by age and exposure to air, rain, and silence. The wind arrives gradually. It does not rush in. It approaches quietly, as if careful not to disturb the night. Leaves shift first, barely noticeable. Branches respond with slow, minimal movement. Air moves through open space, passing between trees, sliding gently along the ground, rising softly toward the bell. The bell begins to sway, not immediately, not suddenly, just enough to acknowledge the wind's presence. A sound forms slowly. It is not sharp, it is not loud. It emerges as a low, rounded tone that spreads outward before dissolving back into the night. The sound does not travel far. It does not echo dramatically. It settles gently into the surrounding air, absorbed by distance and stillness. After the sound fades, silence returns fully. Nothing lingers. Nothing remains unresolved. The bell becomes still again. Time stretches within this pause. Seconds feel wide and unmeasured. The space between moments feels just as important as the moments themselves. The wind does not disappear. It continues moving slowly through the landscape, touching grass, brushing against stone, passing through wooden structures without resistance. Another gentle movement reaches the bell, another small sway, another quiet tone. Each sound feels familiar, predictable, and grounding. There is no surprise, no urgency. Breathing naturally begins to slow. Inhale feels deeper, exhale lasts longer. The pauses between breaths extend comfortably. The bell does not demand listening. It allows awareness to drift in and out freely. In old villages, bells like this were not meant to mark hours. They were meant to soften time, to slow the pace of thought, to remind people to rest. The wind carries no direction. It moves without purpose, guided only by natural flow. The bell responds again, gently, patiently. Sound rises, then fades. Between each tone, the night feels even quieter than before. Thought begins to thin. Ideas lose their edges. Attention loosens its grip. There is no sense of progression, no feeling of moving forward, only a continuous, gentle unfolding. The bell continues to wait. The wind continues to pass. Time continues to stretch and soften around them, and rest deepens naturally, without effort. The night feels even more expansive now, as if the space itself has widened. Nothing feels close. Nothing feels far. Distance loses its meaning. The bell remains suspended in open air, completely still once more. It does not anticipate the wind. It does not prepare. It simply exists in quiet balance. The metal cools gently under the night air. Moisture settles lightly on its surface, forming a thin, invisible layer that reflects no light. Time passes without leaving traces. There is no sound to mark it, no movement to measure it. The wind returns gradually, as it always does. It never arrives all at once. It gathers itself slowly, passing through distant hills, across open ground, through forests and empty paths. Leaves respond first again, then branches, then tall grass bending slightly, before rising back into place. The wind reaches the bell with minimal force. The bell sways almost imperceptibly, just enough to create movement. Sound forms once more, low and smooth. It does not cut through silence. It blends into it. The tone spreads outward gently, becoming thinner as it travels, until it dissolves completely. Silence returns, deeper than before. The bell hangs motionless again, untouched, unbothered. Awareness begins to feel heavy, pleasantly grounded. There is no urge to focus or to follow. Breathing aligns naturally with the slow rhythm of sound and silence. Each breath becomes quieter, softer. The pause after each breath extends. Time within these pauses feels wide and empty. Thought appears briefly. then fades before forming words. The wind continues its slow movement across the landscape, unconcerned with the bell's response. Another gentle movement, another tone. The sound feels familiar now, almost expected, yet never anticipated. Each tone carries no message. It communicates nothing. It exists only as part of the night's texture. The world feels settled, complete, and unchanging. The bell remains patient. It does not tire. It does not hurry. The wind continues to move at its own pace, guided by no destination. Time stretches further, losing definition. Awareness drifts gently, held between sound and silence, without direction. The bell waits again. The wind passes, and the night continues, calm and uninterrupted. The bell remains completely still now, resting in perfect balance. The night feels thick and quiet, as if sound itself has chosen to sleep. Air continues to move, but so slowly that it feels suspended. The wind no longer announces itself. It drifts, barely noticeable, passing through open spaces without disturbing anything. The bell responds only when the movement is just enough. It never overreacts. It sways with patience, honoring the slow rhythm of the night. Another tone forms, lower this time, deeper. It carries weight without heaviness, presence without force. The sound spreads gently through the surrounding space, touching trees, stone, and earth before dissolving naturally. Silence returns, even deeper than before. Time feels increasingly soft. Minutes lose their edges. Moments blur together without resistance. Breathing becomes slower still. The body follows the pace of the night without instruction. The bell waits again, unbothered by the length of the pause. It has no concern for when the next sound will arrive. The wind continues its slow path, brushing lightly against grass, passing over water, slipping through empty corridors of space. Another gentle movement reaches the bell, another quiet response. Each sound feels increasingly familiar, increasingly safe. The space between sounds grows longer. Silence stretches comfortably, filling everything. Thought fades further. There is no desire to think, no need to remember. Awareness drifts without anchor, floating gently within the rhythm of the night. The bell remains. The wind continues. Time loosens its hold. Rest deepens. The bell settles once more into complete stillness. It does not swing. It does not tremble. It rests as if it has always been this way. The night feels deeper now, heavier in the most comfortable sense. The air presses gently, not with weight, but with presence. Silence fills everything evenly. It does not leave gaps. It does not allow interruption. The wind continues to exist, but its movement has become almost impossible to notice. It passes through the world without leaving evidence. The bell remains patient. It has no awareness of time passing. It exists only in this moment, again and again. Sound no longer feels necessary. The space between sounds has become the dominant rhythm. Breathing continues quietly. Inhale and exhale blur together, forming a slow, continuous flow. The body releases remaining tension without awareness. Muscles soften. Weight settles. Time loses all structure. There is no sense of beginning or ending. The bell does not ring again for a long while, and that is perfectly fine. The night holds everything gently, without movement, without expectation. Awareness drifts lower, quieter, less defined. There is nothing to listen for now, nothing to wait for, nothing to follow. The bell remains. The wind passes unnoticed. Time dissolves, and rest continues deep and uninterrupted. Part 12. Old Japanese folk stories told at night. In the countryside of old Japan, long before electricity, long before clocks measured the night, stories were not told to entertain quickly. They were told slowly, patiently, often over many evenings, sometimes over an entire season. When the sun disappeared behind the mountains and darkness settled over villages made of wood and earth, people gathered quietly inside their homes. The doors were closed gently, lamps were lit with oil, a fire burned low in the center of the room. These were the moments when stories emerged. The stories were not written down. They lived only in memory, passed from elders to children, from monks to travelers, from parents to neighbors. Each retelling softened them slightly, changing small details, but never their core. In Japan, many traditional stories were never meant to have a clear ending. The listener was expected to fall asleep before the story was finished. That was not a failure. That was the purpose. In mountain villages, especially in regions like Nagano, Gifu, or deep parts of Tohoku, winter nights were long and silent. Snow pressed against rooftops. Wind moved slowly through pine trees. Inside, voices stayed low so as not to disturb the night. An elder might begin a story by describing a road that passed through a forest. Not an exciting road, a familiar one, a path used by farmers, monks, and travelers. The story would linger on small details: the sound of footsteps on dirt, the feeling of cold air, the weight of a cloak. Nothing dramatic happened quickly. Often, the storyteller would pause for a long time, long enough for listeners to relax, long enough for breathing to slow. These stories were deeply connected to place, a specific mountain, a specific river, a shrine known only to the village, a tree that had stood for generations. One common type of story involved a traveler who stopped for the night at a small roadside shrine. The story would describe the shrine in careful detail: the wooden pillars, the rope hanging at the entrance, the stone lantern covered in moss. The storyteller would explain how travelers were taught to bow quietly before resting there, not to ask for anything, only to show respect. Sometimes the story would mention a presence, a kami, a spirit, not as something frightening, but as something quietly aware. The presence rarely spoke. It did not reveal secrets. It simply existed, observing, sharing the space. In Japanese folklore, silence is not empty. It is meaningful. Many stories rely more on what is not said than on what is explained. Another common setting for these stories was the home itself, a family house built of wood with sliding doors and tatami mats. The story might describe the way the firelight moved across the walls, the sound of wind outside, the creaking of the building as it settled at night. These details were not decoration. They were the story. Listeners were meant to imagine themselves there, sitting quietly, wrapped in blankets, feeling the warmth of the fire. Stories often involved everyday people: farmers, woodcutters, fishermen, monks traveling between temples. They were not heroes. They were ordinary, calm figures moving slowly through the world. If something unusual happened, it happened gently. A sound heard at night, a figure seen briefly in the distance, a dream that lingered after waking. The storyteller would never explain everything. Explanations were considered unnecessary. Mystery was not something to solve. It was something to accept. In many villages, children learned quickly that if they asked too many questions, the story would slow down even more. Details would become longer. Pauses would stretch. Eventually, eyelids grew heavy. These stories were deeply tied to Buddhist and Shinto thought: impermanence, quiet observation, respect for unseen forces, acceptance of not knowing. A monk telling a story might mention a temple bell ringing far away. Not to mark time, but to remind listeners of stillness. Stories unfolded at the pace of breathing, slow, even, repetitive. Some stories were told again and again, always stopping at the same point, right before something happened, right before an answer was given. The unfinished ending was intentional. It allowed the story to continue living inside the listener, changing quietly as sleep arrived. In this way, stories were not performances. They were environments. They surrounded the listener, held them, then gently released them into rest. And as the night deepened, the storyteller's voice softened further, blending into the quiet sounds of the house, until story, silence, and sleep became the same thing. In many regions of Japan, the act of telling stories at night followed an unspoken structure. There was no announcement, no formal beginning. The story simply started when the house became quiet enough to receive it. An elder might clear their throat softly. Someone would adjust the fire. The room would settle. Stories were often told while sitting on tatami mats, legs folded, bodies relaxed. The posture itself encouraged stillness. Movement was minimal. The voice remained low and steady. In rural areas, especially before the Edo period, nights were long and uninterrupted. Without artificial light, darkness arrived early and stayed until dawn. This created the perfect environment for slow storytelling. One common category of nighttime stories involved old villages that existed slightly apart from the present world. Villages located deep in valleys, near forests, or at the edge of mountains. Places where the boundary between the human world and the spirit world felt thinner. The storyteller would describe the village carefully: how many houses it had, where the river flowed, which path led to the shrine, which direction the wind usually came from. Listeners were expected to recognize these details. Even if the village was fictional, it felt familiar. In these stories, time moved differently. A single evening could last a very long time. Events unfolded slowly, with long pauses between actions. A person might walk from one house to another, and the story would describe every step. The sound of sandals on earth, the feeling of cold air on the face, the quiet glow of lantern light. Lanterns were important elements in many Japanese stories, not as symbols, but as practical objects. Their soft light defined the boundaries of safety within the darkness. Beyond the lantern's glow, things were left undefined. The darkness was not described in detail. It was allowed to remain unknown. Many stories involved encounters that were subtle rather than dramatic. A traveler noticing that a village seemed quieter than expected. A monk sensing that someone was watching without ever seeing them. In Japanese folklore, what is not seen is often more important than what is revealed. Another frequent theme was repetition. A sound heard every night at the same time, a figure seen at the same place along a road, a dream that returns again and again. The storyteller would repeat certain phrases deliberately, not to bore the listener, but to calm them. Repetition created familiarity, and familiarity invited rest. Children listening to these stories learned early that patience was required. Nothing exciting happened quickly. The reward was not resolution, but calm. Some stories were specifically told during certain seasons. In winter, stories focused on snow, isolation, and quiet endurance. In summer, stories involved insects, water, and night air. Autumn stories often centered on travel, fading light, and the feeling of things coming to an end. Spring stories felt lighter, but still restrained. The seasons were never explained, they were simply present. Buddhist monks often played a role in these nighttime stories, not as teachers, but as travelers passing through villages. Their presence added a quiet seriousness to the narrative. A monk might stay one night, share a meal, tell a short story, then leave at dawn. His story might remain unfinished, his purpose unexplained. This reflected a common belief in Japanese culture. Not everything needs to be understood to be meaningful. Storytelling was also a way to teach attentiveness without instruction. By listening slowly, one learned how to observe quietly. As the story continued, the storyteller's voice often grew softer. Sentences became longer. Pauses stretched. Listeners were not expected to stay awake until the end. Falling asleep was considered a natural response. If a listener fell asleep before the story ended, the story was said to continue quietly on its own. In this way, stories were not owned by the teller. They belonged to the night itself. And as the fire burned lower and the room grew darker, the story gradually faded into silence, leaving only the feeling of having been somewhere calm, familiar, and safe. As the night deepened, the stories often became slower, not because there was less to say, but because each detail was allowed to settle fully before moving on. In many villages, storytellers were careful about pacing. They knew that the rhythm of a story mattered more than its content. A calm rhythm helped the body relax. A steady rhythm invited sleep. A common setting for these nighttime stories was the edge of the village, where houses gave way to fields, forests, or mountain paths. These places were neither fully human nor fully wild. They existed quietly between worlds. The storyteller might describe a narrow road leading away from the village, a road used rarely, mostly by travelers or monks. The road would be described slowly, step by step, without urgency. There would be no danger waiting there, no sudden events, only the feeling of distance and quiet. Many stories spoke of yado, temporary shelters along roads, simple wooden structures where travelers could rest for the night. These shelters were important in folklore because they represented pauses rather than destinations. A traveler might arrive at such a place as night fell. The story would describe how they removed their sandals, how they sat down, how they listened to the wind outside. Sometimes, the traveler would hear a sound, not something frightening, just something unfamiliar. The sound of water moving nearby, the creak of wood, the distant call of an animal. The storyteller would not explain the sound. Explanation was unnecessary. The sound simply existed. In Japanese folklore, spirits often appeared in ordinary settings. They did not announce themselves. They did not demand attention. They were part of the landscape. A story might mention a yokai briefly, not in detail, not with a description meant to scare, simply as a presence felt rather than seen. Listeners were expected to accept this without surprise. The supernatural was not separate from daily life. It moved quietly alongside it. Another common element in nighttime stories was memory. Stories were often told as recollections rather than immediate events. Someone remembering something that happened long ago, or remembering something they were told by someone else. This distance softened the story. It removed urgency. A storyteller might say, "Long ago, someone once told me," and then pause for a long time before continuing. That pause was part of the story. In homes, the fire would burn lower as the story continued. Shadows would stretch. the room would grow quieter. The storyteller's voice often dropped to a near whisper, not to create suspense, but to match the stillness of the night. Listeners would begin to lose track of details. Names would blur, places would blend together. This was expected. The purpose of the story was not clarity. It was atmosphere. Some stories involved rituals performed quietly at night, small acts, lighting incense, leaving an offering at a shrine, saying a short prayer. These rituals were never explained in detail. They were simply part of the rhythm of life. In Buddhist-influenced stories, impermanence was always present. Things passed, moments ended, people moved on. Nothing lasted forever, and that was not treated as something sad. It was accepted calmly. A story might follow a character for a short time, then let them fade away without explanation. The storyteller did not return to them. The listener was not meant to wonder what happened next. As the story continued, the voice became slower, words stretched, pauses lengthened. Eventually, the story reached a point where it no longer moved forward. It circled gently around a single image: a road at night, a quiet shrine, a dimly lit room. Listeners often fell asleep during these moments. Their breathing slowed, their bodies relaxed. The story continued quietly, even if no one was fully awake to hear it. And in this way, stories blended seamlessly into the night, becoming part of the same slow, steady stillness that surrounded the village. As the night grew later, stories often shifted toward moments of quiet routine, because routine was comforting. In old Japan, repetition was not boring, it was reassuring. A storyteller might describe a household preparing to sleep, the careful folding of futons, the way lanterns were dimmed rather than extinguished completely, the sound of sliding doors closing softly, one after another. These details were familiar to every listener. They required no imagination. They allowed the mind to rest. Stories at this stage of the night often focused on ordinary evenings rather than remarkable events. A family sharing a simple meal, a traveler warming his hands near a fire, a monk sitting alone, listening to insects outside a temple. In many regions, especially in Kansai and Kyushu, storytellers would describe the surrounding sounds of the night: crickets, frogs near rice fields, wind moving through bamboo groves. These sounds were not added for atmosphere. They were part of daily life. Listeners could hear similar sounds outside their own homes, which made the story blend seamlessly with reality. Some stories mention specific objects commonly found in Japanese homes: a kettle resting near the hearth, a wooden chest holding clothing, a brush set aside after writing a letter. The storyteller would linger on these objects, describing their textures and weight, the smoothness of wood worn by years of use, the quiet sound made when an object was placed down carefully. In folklore, objects often carried memory, not magic in a dramatic sense, but the memory of being used over time. A story might mention an old fan used every summer, or a bowl passed down through generations. The object itself did nothing extraordinary. Its presence alone was enough. Another recurring element in nighttime stories was waiting. Waiting for dawn, waiting for weather to change, waiting for a traveler to return. Waiting was never presented as stressful. It was calm and patient. In agricultural communities, waiting was a normal part of life. Waiting for crops to grow, waiting for seasons to pass. Stories reflected this rhythm. A storyteller might describe someone sitting quietly, listening to rain fall on a roof. The sound would be described slowly, evenly, without variation. Rain stories were especially common during the rainy season. The steady rhythm of rain made it easier to fall asleep. Stories involving temples often described monks performing simple evening routines, sweeping courtyards, lighting incense, sitting quietly in meditation. These actions were not explained philosophically. They were simply observed. In many tales, the story would drift toward the edge of sleep deliberately. The storyteller would repeat phrases, restating the same scene in slightly different ways. This repetition was intentional. It allowed the listener to stop actively listening without feeling that something important was being missed. The storyteller understood that the story did not need to be finished. In some villages, it was believed that finishing a story completely could disrupt the calm of the night. Leaving it open kept the balance. As the voice grew softer, sentences became longer and less structured. Words blended gently together. Listeners were no longer expected to remember details. Memory itself began to relax. Eventually, the story reached a point where it no longer described actions, only presence, a room, a person, a quiet moment held in place. At this point, the storyteller might stop speaking without announcing it. Silence would take over naturally. The fire would continue to burn low. Night sounds would remain, and the story, unfinished and unspoken, would continue quietly in the minds of those already asleep. As this night of stories slowly comes to a pause, there is no need to hurry back to the world. The villages, the voices, and the quiet moments can remain where they are, resting softly in the background. This is only one part of a much longer journey through old Japanese stories, landscapes, and traditions. In the next video, we will continue exploring more nighttime tales, winter legends, and forgotten places, told slowly and gently, just as they were meant to be. If this video helped you relax, rest, or fall asleep, you can support the channel by liking the video and subscribing. New long episodes will be released regularly, always with the same calm rhythm and immersive atmosphere. For now, you can let the story fade naturally into silence. The night remains quiet, and the journey will continue in the next video.